Welcome to 3 a.m. Static. In the stillness of the night, when the world sleeps, the static whispers. Here, we unearth the forgotten, the forbidden, and the unsettling. Tonight's stories will crawl beneath your skin and nest in your thoughts. So turn off the lights, close your eyes, and let the static guide you. Before we begin, let us know where and when you're listening from. Drop your country or the exact time you're tuning in, because at 3 a.m., you're never really alone.
Story 1. The Babysitter's Secret. The old Victorian house groaned under the weight of the night, each creak and sigh of its aged timbers amplifying the silence. Inside, 17-year-old Emily, perched on a threadbare armchair in the dimly lit living room, tried to ignore the unsettling feeling that had settled upon her like a shroud. She was babysitting for the Millers, 8-year-old Lily and 6-year-old Tom, and they were finally asleep, their small breaths a soft rhythm in the otherwise unnervingly quiet house. Emily glanced at the grandfather clock in the hallway. 11:17 p.m. Another hour and a half to go. She pulled her phone from her pocket, the pale light momentarily illuminating the elaborate carvings on the antique furniture. Scrolling through social media provided little distraction. The eerie atmosphere of the house clung to her, a suffocating blanket of unease. A sudden scraping sound from upstairs sent a jolt through her. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Lily and Tom slept soundly, their small bodies cocooned in their beds upstairs. Emily told herself it was just the house settling, the old wood expanding and contracting in the night air. But the scraping sound had been deliberate, not random. It was the kind of scraping that suggested something was being dragged across a wooden floor. She rose cautiously, her every step echoing in the vast, echoing space of the house. The shadows stretched and contorted, playing tricks on her eyes, turning familiar objects into grotesque shapes. The flickering gaslight in the hallway cast long, dancing shadows that seemed to writhe and twist on the walls, mimicking the movements she'd earlier perceived. She felt a prickling sensation on the back of her neck, the hairs rising, as if she was being watched. The air grew colder as she ascended the creaking staircase, each step a hesitant advance into the unknown. The scent of dust and old wood hung heavy in the air, mixed with a faint, underlying odor that she couldn't quite place, something musty, vaguely metallic, and unsettlingly familiar. The house seemed to hold its breath as she moved, the silence broken only by the frantic rhythm of her own pulse. Reaching the top of the stairs, she paused, listening intently. The scraping sound had stopped, replaced by a low humming that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. It was a deep, resonant hum, a vibration that resonated within her very bones, making her teeth ache. Her phone's flashlight beam cut a swathe through the darkness, revealing nothing unusual. But the feeling of being watched persisted, growing stronger with each passing second. Then she saw it. A fleeting shadow, moving just beyond the edge of the light beam, in the periphery of her vision. It was too quick to be sure, a mere flicker of movement that could have been a trick of the light. Yet, the feeling of dread that accompanied it was undeniably real. She moved slowly toward Lily's room, her hand trembling as she reached for the doorknob. The door creaked open, revealing the girl sleeping peacefully in her bed. Emily checked on Tom next, finding him equally undisturbed. Returning to the hallway, the humming intensified, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It felt like a pressure building inside her ears, a constant, low thrum that resonated through her body, a disquieting counterpoint to the erratic thump of her heart. As she descended the staircase, she heard a whisper, soft and sibilant, barely audible above the humming. It seemed to come from the shadows, from the very walls of the house. It was not a word, but a feeling, a suggestion, a sense of creeping dread that coiled in her stomach. It felt like an intrusion, a violation, a silent suggestion of something terrible, just beyond the veil of her awareness. Back in the living room, she tried to calm herself. It was just the house, she told herself. Old houses make noises. Shadows play tricks on your eyes in the dark. But a deep-seated unease remained. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of being subtly, yet undeniably, threatened. The next hour crawled by, each moment stretching into an eternity. Every creak, every rustle, every whisper sent a fresh wave of icy fear through her. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to shift and writhe, taking on the grotesque forms of things that she couldn't quite define. Once or twice she thought she saw something moving in the darkness beyond the windows, a fleeting glimpse of something large and dark, just outside the edge of the light. As the clock ticked towards midnight, she started to become convinced that she was not alone in the house. The feeling of dread, of being watched, became almost tangible. She could almost feel the presence of something unseen, something malevolent, circling her, assessing her, waiting for the opportune moment. The humming grew louder, more insistent, punctuated by the almost imperceptible whispers that seemed to slither into her mind, directly into her thoughts. The whispers were filled with a sense of ancient malice, of deep-seated hatred. They were a symphony of dread, a chilling chorus of nameless terror. Just as she was about to reach for her phone to call for help, the lights flickered and died, plunging the house into complete darkness. A terrifying scream ripped through the silence. It wasn't hers, though she could feel her own scream building. It was a high-pitched, blood-curdling shriek that echoed through the house, the sound of pure terror, seemingly emanating from the very heart of the house itself. Emily huddled in the armchair, her eyes wide with terror, her body trembling uncontrollably. The darkness was absolute, the silence punctuated only by the frantic beat of her own heart. The whispers intensified, no longer subtle suggestions but harsh commands, insistent voices that seemed to claw their way into her mind. In the pitch-black darkness, the whispers turned into a chorus, a cacophony of voices, and she could almost feel their icy touch all around her. She felt a presence, cold and cruel, closing in on her. The shadows, no longer just shadows, seemed to writhe and coalesce around her, their forms shifting and distorting, twisting into grotesque shapes that defied description. She felt a presence near her, a weight that settled heavily on her chest. She knew, with a terrifying certainty, that she was not alone. She felt as if something was waiting, watching, feeling her terror. Then, as abruptly as it had begun, the darkness lifted. The lights flickered back to life, revealing a scene that was eerily normal. Lily and Tom slept peacefully upstairs. Nothing was disturbed. The room was just as it had been before the lights went out. Emily, breathing heavily, tried to rationalize what had happened. It was just a power outage, just her imagination, just the house playing tricks on her. Yet the lingering feeling of dread, of being watched, remained. The whispers faded, but their memory lingered. The cold, the sense of being watched, were indelibly etched in her mind. She quickly finished her babysitting shift, her every step filled with renewed anxiety. She left the Miller house as soon as she possibly could and ran towards the closest streetlight. She glanced back and saw the house still standing, the windows like dark, empty eyes. The experience left her shaken, haunted by the lingering whispers and shadows of that terrifying night. The night she faced the reality of true horror, a night she would never forget. The whispers, she knew, would haunt her. She had seen things in that house, felt things, heard things that would forever alter her perception of reality and darkness. She would never again look at shadows the same way, never again trust the silence of the night. The lingering dread was a permanent fixture in her mind, a stark reminder of the night she babysat in the house that held a secret. A secret that whispered in the darkness. The grandfather clock chimed midnight, each toll a hammer blow against Emily's already frayed nerves. The unsettling quiet that had previously reigned was now replaced by a different kind of silence, a heavy, oppressive stillness that pressed down on her like a physical weight. She found herself staring at the shadowed corners of the living room, half expecting to see something lurking there, something that had been watching her all along. Then, a sound. Not a creak of the house, not the settling of old wood, but a soft murmuring, seemingly emanating from upstairs. It was almost too faint to hear, a whisper carried on a current of cold air that seemed to seep into the room, raising the hairs on the back of her neck. Initially, she dismissed it as the wind, a trick of her overactive imagination, but the sound persisted, growing in intensity, morphing into a low, indistinct hum that resonated deep within her chest. Hesitantly, she rose from the armchair, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The humming intensified as she approached the staircase, a low, resonant drone that vibrated in her bones, causing her teeth to ache. Each step she took echoed eerily in the silent house, each creak of the old wood a sharp counterpoint to the constant, low thrumming. Reaching the top of the stairs, she paused, listening intently. The humming had now shifted, becoming more defined, less of a drone and more of a series of whispered voices. They were indistinct, unintelligible, a babble of sounds that seemed to weave together and separate, forming patterns and then dissolving into chaos. The whispers seemed to be coming from Lily and Tom's room, a chilling cacophony of murmuring voices that sent a fresh wave of icy fear through her. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the doorknob, her mind struggling to rationalize what she was hearing. It couldn't be the children, could it? They were asleep, soundly, weren't they? Driven by a morbid curiosity, she slowly opened the door, her hand trembling as the wood creaked on its hinges. The room was shrouded in darkness, the only illumination coming from the pale moonlight filtering through the window. Lily and Tom lay peacefully in their beds, their small bodies still and undisturbed. Yet, the whispers persisted, seemingly emanating from the darkness beyond the beds. The words, or rather sounds, were impossible to decipher. They sounded like a language, a twisted, guttural tongue she'd never heard before, a disturbing melody that scraped against her eardrums, weaving a tapestry of unease and dread. The voices rose and fell in a rhythmic pattern, a disturbing lullaby that seemed to pulsate in time with the heavy, labored breathing of the house itself. It felt as though the whispers were not just auditory, but rather a physical sensation, a chilling pressure building in her ears, pressing down on her skull, a violation of her thoughts. The chilling aspect wasn't just the incomprehensibility, it was the unsettling tone, an undercurrent of malice and menace that sent shivers down her spine. They lacked warmth, kindness, or even human emotion. They were cold, detached, yet somehow intensely personal, as if directed specifically at her, whispering secrets into the very fabric of her being. It felt as though the voices were attempting to communicate something urgent, crucial, yet entirely beyond her comprehension. Emily felt a growing unease, a deep, visceral dread that gnawed at her insides. The whispers seemed to insinuate themselves into her mind, wrapping around her thoughts, their insidious suggestions coiling in her consciousness. They were not words, but impressions, feelings, a direct infiltration of her thoughts, a subtle manipulation of her psyche. She backed out of the room, closing the door slowly and silently, the whispers now seeming to follow her, to cling to her, as if they were trying to pull her back into the darkness. She stood in the hallway, her breath catching in her throat, the voices now a constant, unnerving presence. The humming had intensified, merging with the whispers, creating a cacophony of sound that vibrated in her very being. The coldness intensified, too. She could feel it, a palpable chill that seemed to seep from the walls, from the very foundations of the house. It wasn't the cold of the night air, it was a different kind of cold, an unnatural coldness that felt malevolent, invasive, and utterly terrifying. Her skin prickled, her teeth chattered uncontrollably, despite the effort she put into maintaining control. She considered running, calling for help, but something held her back, a perverse curiosity, a desperate need to understand the source of these unsettling sounds. The whispers were too intense to ignore, the malevolent energy too pervasive to simply flee. As the minutes ticked by, the whispers began to coalesce, becoming clearer, more distinct, though still incomprehensible. It felt like an ancient language, older than time itself, filled with cryptic implications of unspeakable horrors. She had the disturbing sensation that she was witnessing a ritual, an ancient practice taking place within the very walls of the house, unseen by her eyes, yet acutely felt through the chilling presence of the whispers. The whispers seemed to grow in strength, intensifying as she descended the stairs, weaving themselves into the creaks and groans of the old house, intertwining with the humming, and merging into a symphony of dread. They filled the house, penetrating into every corner, every shadowed recess, swirling around her like a vortex of malevolent energy. The whispers, the hum, the cold, all were converging into a terrifying crescendo of unearthly sounds. Reaching the living room, she collapsed onto the armchair, her body shaking uncontrollably. The whispers continued, relentless and haunting, weaving intricate patterns of incomprehensible sounds that felt more like a psychic assault than simple auditory experiences. She tried to cover her ears, to block them out, but the sound seemed to penetrate her mind, her soul, her very existence. It was as if the voices had found a way to bypass her hearing, to speak directly to the deepest recesses of her being. Suddenly, a distinct sound cut through the cacophony of whispers. It was a faint scratching sound, high-pitched and unsettling. It sounded like fingernails scraping against wood. It was coming from near the fireplace, from within the shadows cast by the towering, antique mantelpiece. Cautiously, she reached for her phone, her trembling fingers fumbling with the screen. As the pale light illuminated the fireplace, she saw it, a small, dark shape, flitting behind the ornate carvings of the mantelpiece. It was too quick to see clearly, a mere flicker of movement, a shadow that dissolved back into darkness as quickly as it had appeared. The scratching sound stopped, the whispers momentarily fading. Yet, the feeling of unease remained, heightened by this fresh intrusion into her already terrifying experience. It was as though something had been watching her, something sinister and unseen, a presence that had silently observed her reactions to the increasingly horrifying sounds, a malevolent entity that relished her fear. Emily knew then, with a cold, dreadful certainty, that this house held a secret, a terrible, horrific secret that the whispers were desperately trying to convey. The terrifying truth was no longer something hidden in the shadows. It was something she could now feel, sense, an intangible horror that permeated the very air she breathed. The whispers were a warning, a promise, a threat. And as dawn began to break, painting the eastern sky with pale streaks of light, Emily knew that the whispers wouldn't stop. They would linger, a constant reminder of the night she spent in the house, listening to the secrets it whispered in the dark, secrets that would forever haunt her waking hours and torment her sleep. The chilling memory of those whispers would forever be etched into her mind, a testament to the night she encountered something far more sinister and terrifying than she could ever have imagined. The house, she realized, would never let her forget. The grandfather clock's chime, a stark counterpoint to the unsettling quiet, had been the prelude to the night's true horror. Now, a different kind of dread began to creep into Emily's heart, something colder, more visceral than the whispers. It started subtly. A porcelain doll, perched precariously on the mantelpiece, inexplicably toppled, shattering on the hearth. The sound, sharp and sudden, sliced through the heavy stillness, leaving Emily momentarily breathless. She dismissed it at first. A tremor, a gust of wind. But then the lights flickered, casting long, dancing shadows across the walls that seemed to writhe and twist, mocking her attempts at rationalization. The shadows weren't just shadows, they held a depth, an almost sentient quality, as if they were living things, observing her with malevolent curiosity. A chill, deeper and more pervasive than the night air could ever produce, settled in the room. It wasn't just cold, it was an unnatural coldness, a bone-deep freeze that burrowed into her very marrow, despite the warmth of the fireplace casting its weak light across the room. Her teeth began to chatter, an uncontrollable tremor that refused to be suppressed. Then came the glimpses, fleeting and tantalizing, of a shadowy figure at the edge of her vision. It was always peripheral, always just out of reach, a fleeting darkness in the corner of her eye, a suggestion of something lurking, watching. It moved with unnatural speed, a blur of black that seemed to melt into the shadows, leaving her heart hammering against her ribs. Each time she turned to face it, it vanished, leaving her with the uneasy feeling of being observed, scrutinized by something malevolent and unseen. The whispers returned, their insidious suggestions swirling around her consciousness, intensifying the dread she was already experiencing. They seemed to weave their way through the creaks and groans of the old house, now merged with the rhythmic thumping of her own heart, each beat a heavy hammer blow against her sanity. The whispers were no longer merely sounds, they felt like a physical presence, an icy hand reaching out to grasp her, to drag her into the darkness. She tried to focus on something tangible, to anchor herself to reality. She thought of her friends, her family, the mundane joys of everyday life. But even those thoughts seemed tainted by the encroaching darkness, warped and distorted by the malevolent energy that pervaded the house. It felt as if the house itself was alive, a sentient entity filled with malice, reveling in her fear. Her efforts to maintain her composure failed miserably. Each fleeting glance at a shadowed corner sent a fresh wave of icy terror through her. Her senses were heightened, every creak, every rustle, every whisper, amplifying her growing panic. She found herself jumping at the slightest noise, her body tense, her muscles coiled, ready to flee at any moment. A heavy, antique bookcase near the fireplace swayed violently, its contents rattling menacingly. It was a gradual tilt at first, a subtle shifting that she initially dismissed as her imagination. But then it started to topple, the massive piece of furniture threatening to crash to the floor, narrowly missing her as it crashed with a deafening thud, shaking the house to its foundations. Dust swirled in the beam of the flashlight she had finally managed to grab. Her breath hitched in her throat. This was beyond a trick of the light, a product of her overactive imagination. Something was in this house, something malevolent and powerful, and it was making itself known. She fumbled for her phone, her fingers trembling so violently that she almost dropped it. The screen illuminated her face, its pale light stark against the darkness of the room. She wanted to call someone, anyone, but the fear that gripped her paralyzed her ability to make the call. The fear wasn't just for herself. She felt a deep, primal protectiveness towards the sleeping children, a desperate need to keep them safe from whatever lurked in the shadows. As she held her phone, a chilling draft swept through the room, extinguishing the feeble light from the fireplace. The darkness descended again, deeper and more suffocating this time, the shadows intensifying, reaching out like grasping claws. The air grew thick with an unnatural stillness, the silence broken only by the heavy thudding of her heart. The whispers started again, louder this time, more insistent, more terrifying. They seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, weaving a horrifying tapestry of sounds that echoed through the house, an insidious melody of dread. Her fear reached a fever pitch, the line between reality and hallucination blurring into an indistinguishable mix of terror. She began to search the house systematically, her flashlight beam dancing across the walls, illuminating each shadowy corner, each darkened recess. Her fear was replaced with a grim determination to find the source of this evil, to unmask the thing that tormented her, to understand the whispers that filled the house with dread. But despite her efforts, the source of her torment remained elusive, hidden within the deep, malevolent shadows. In the master bedroom, she discovered a single, lone playing card lying on the floor, the Queen of Spades. It seemed oddly out of place, and the way it rested, face up, sent a fresh chill crawling down her spine. It was as though the card had been deliberately placed there, a macabre message left for her to discover. This time, the whispers weren't just indistinct murmurings, they seemed to form words, although the words themselves were utterly incomprehensible. They sounded ancient, primordial, emanating from a realm beyond human understanding. Yet they possessed an unsettling clarity, the sounds resonating deep within her soul. She felt the growing sense that she was not alone, that she was being watched, studied, by something that existed beyond the realm of human comprehension. The feeling of being watched intensified. It wasn't just the shadowy figures or the whispers, it was a deeper sense of being observed, analyzed, evaluated by a malevolent intelligence that could not be seen but could be felt. The air itself seemed to vibrate with a palpable energy, a malevolent force that seeped from the walls, from the floors, from the very foundations of the house. The house was alive, it breathed, it pulsed, and it wanted her gone. The climax of the night came swiftly and unexpectedly. A scratching sound, sharp and metallic, cut through the unsettling silence. It was coming from the children's room. She raced towards the door, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. As she flung open the door, the room was bathed in moonlight. Lily and Tom slept peacefully, undisturbed. Yet, the scratching continued, accompanied by a low humming that resonated from deep within the walls. The source of the scratching was something dark and sinuous, snaking its way along the floorboards beneath the children's bed, its movements too quick to see clearly. It was like watching a shadow writhe, yet it seemed to have a physical presence, a tangible entity of darkness. Then, it was gone, as quickly as it had appeared, leaving Emily trembling, breathless, and utterly terrified. The silence that followed was more terrifying than the sounds that preceded it. The emptiness felt pregnant with unseen horrors. Emily knew that she had to leave. She scooped up Lily and Tom, bundling them into their coats, her hands shaking so violently that she could barely fasten the buttons. As she fled the house, escaping the clutches of the unseen entity, the whispers followed her, echoing in her ears, a chilling reminder of the night's terrifying events. The house, she knew, would not let her forget. It had imprinted itself upon her mind, a nightmare that would forever haunt her dreams and her waking moments. The whispers, the shadows, the chilling presence, they had become an inescapable part of her reality, a constant reminder of the terrifying secret hidden within the walls of that house. The secret of an unseen presence, a malevolent entity that lurked in the shadows, waiting for its next victim. The adrenaline still coursing through her veins, Emily bundled the sleeping children into the car, the engine's roar a welcome counterpoint to the lingering silence of the house. She didn't look back, couldn't bring herself to. The image of that sinuous darkness, slithering beneath the children's bed, was seared into her memory, a horrifying tableau that would likely haunt her dreams for years to come. The whispers, though fainter now, still echoed in her ears, a chilling reminder of the night's terror. The drive back was a blur, her mind racing, trying to make sense of the events that had unfolded. It wasn't just the unexplained phenomena, the falling objects, the flickering lights, the whispers, it was the feeling, the palpable sense of malevolent presence that had permeated the house, a chilling aura that clung to her like a shroud. As dawn broke, painting the sky in soft hues of pink and orange, Emily arrived home, exhausted but shaken to her core. She deposited Lily and Tom in their beds, her hands trembling as she tucked them in. The sight of their peaceful sleep offered a small measure of comfort, a fragile respite from the storm raging within her. But the relief was fleeting, overshadowed by the unsettling questions that gnawed at her mind. What had happened in that house? And what was the significance of the Queen of Spades? The need to understand, to unravel the mystery, propelled her into action. Returning to the house felt like a descent into madness, a reckless plunge into the heart of her fear, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she needed to know more. She knew she shouldn't go back, that it was dangerous, even irrational. But the pull was too strong, the unanswered questions echoing in the hollow spaces of her mind, driving her forward despite the growing dread. She found the house as she had left it, silent, empty, the morning sun revealing the extent of its age and decay. Dust motes danced in the weak sunlight filtering through the grimy windows. The silence, however, was different this time. It wasn't the suffocating quiet of the previous night, it was an eerie calm, as if the malevolent presence had retreated, leaving behind only a lingering chill. Her gaze fell upon a small, wooden chest tucked away in a shadowed corner of the attic. It was unremarkable at first glance, a simple, unassuming piece of furniture that blended seamlessly with the accumulated clutter of decades past. But something about its presence caught her attention, a subtle tug of intuition that guided her towards it. Hesitantly, she opened the chest. Inside, nestled among yellowed lace and moth-eaten velvet, was a leather-bound diary. The cover was worn and faded, its edges softened by time, yet it felt strangely intact, as if it had been carefully preserved. The pages were filled with elegant script, a cursive handwriting that spoke of a different era, an era that somehow intertwined with the unsettling events of the previous night. The diary belonged to the children's mother, Sarah. The first few entries were mundane, descriptions of everyday life, of childhood memories, of hopes and dreams. But as Emily delved deeper, the tone began to shift, the words becoming increasingly unsettling, tinged with a growing sense of dread and foreboding. Sarah's entries described recurring nightmares, vivid and disturbing visions that seemed to bleed into her waking hours. She wrote of shadowy figures that lurked at the edges of her perception, of whispers that slithered into her consciousness, of a chilling coldness that permeated her very being. These weren't simply nightmares, they were terrifying premonitions, harrowing glimpses into a darker reality. The entries grew more frequent, more desperate, detailing escalating supernatural experiences. Objects moved inexplicably, doors slammed shut without explanation, and a bone-chilling dread hung heavy in the air. Sarah described a growing sense of being watched, of being steadied by something unseen, something malevolent that lurked in the shadows, waiting for its opportunity to strike. As Emily read further, the diary revealed a family history steeped in the paranormal. Sarah's ancestors, it seemed, had a legacy of encounters with dark entities, a history of unexplained events that stretched back generations. The diary detailed stories of disappearances, of unexplained deaths, of a pervasive, almost palpable sense of evil that clung to the family name, echoing through the generations. The writing became frantic in the final entries. Sarah described the growing intensity of the disturbances, the escalating fear that threatened to consume her. She wrote of a desperate search for answers, of a growing understanding of the sinister force that seemed to have taken root in the house, feeding on the family's fear and despair. Her descriptions were visceral, painting a vivid picture of the relentless dread, the suffocating fear that filled the house, turning it into a prison of terror. She spoke of a pervasive sense of being watched, a chilling awareness that something was always there, always observing her, always waiting. The whispers, she wrote, were the most terrifying aspect of it all, insidious suggestions that twisted her thoughts, playing on her fears, driving her to the brink of madness. The final entry was abrupt, unfinished, a testament to the terror that had overcome her. It ended mid-sentence, the ink smudged, as if written in haste, the pen dropping from her trembling hand in a desperate attempt to escape the overwhelming fear that engulfed her. The diary ended with the words, "The shadows grow deeper, they're coming," and then nothing more. Emily closed the diary, her hands shaking uncontrollably. The chilling words echoed in her mind, a chilling testament to Sarah's terror. The diary offered a terrifying explanation for the events of the previous night. The house wasn't just haunted, it was cursed, steeped in a history of dark entities and malevolent energies. The family's legacy of encounters with the supernatural was no mere coincidence, it was a terrifying truth. The Queen of Spades, the card she had found in the master bedroom, now held a terrifying significance. It wasn't just a random playing card, it was a macabre calling card, a dark omen left behind by the entity that haunted the house. The card represented a chilling connection to the family's history of supernatural encounters, a symbol of the dark legacy that Sarah had inherited and had been unable to escape. Emily felt a chilling wave of fear wash over her. It wasn't just the house that was cursed, the curse seemed to be somehow linked to the family, passing down through generations, a relentless cycle of terror that showed no sign of ending. The thought of Lily and Tom, innocent victims caught in this terrifying legacy, filled her with a deep sense of protectiveness and overwhelming dread. She knew, with a chilling certainty, that she had to do something, to break the cycle, to save the children from the same fate that had befallen their mother. But how? The question hung heavy in the air, a terrifying challenge in the face of unimaginable horror. The diary had opened a door to a terrifying world, a world of shadows, whispers, and malevolent entities, a world where the line between reality and nightmare had become dangerously blurred. Emily's journey had only just begun, and the road ahead was paved with fear, uncertainty, and the chilling knowledge that she was facing an enemy far beyond human comprehension. The fight to protect Lily and Tom, and to break the curse that bound the family to its dark legacy, was far from over. The whispers, the shadows, the chilling presence, these would be her constant companions, a terrifying reality she would have to confront, head-on, if she hoped to survive. The rusted handle of the attic door groaned in protest as Emily pulled it shut, the sound echoing unnervingly in the oppressive silence of the house. She didn't dare look back, the image of the diary's final, chilling entry, "The shadows grow deeper, they're coming," burned into her retinas. The weight of Sarah's despair, the palpable dread that emanated from those final words, pressed down on her, a suffocating blanket of terror. The descent down the creaking stairs felt like an eternity. Each step was a calculated risk, each creak a potential alarm bell in the suffocating stillness. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the oppressive quiet. She could almost feel the eyes on her, watching her retreat, following her every move. The whispers, though faint, still seemed to cling to her, a cold breath on her neck, a constant reminder of the unseen presence that still lingered within the decaying walls. Reaching the ground floor, Emily stumbled towards the front door, her legs leaden with exhaustion and fear. The brass doorknob felt icy cold beneath her trembling fingers, the metal radiating a chill that went straight to her bones. As she fumbled with the lock, she could have sworn she heard a faint rustling sound from the shadows, a subtle shift of air, a whisper just beyond the edge of her hearing. It was enough to send a fresh wave of panic through her. The door finally swung open, revealing the pale light of the approaching dawn. The crisp morning air, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine, was a stark contrast to the suffocating atmosphere of the house. Emily gasped, drawing in deep breaths, as if trying to fill her lungs with the life that had been almost choked out of her inside. The relief was palpable, a wave of exhaustion washing over her as she stumbled out into the sunlight. As she scrambled into her car, she didn't look back. She couldn't. The thought of turning, of even glancing at the house, was enough to send a fresh wave of icy dread through her veins. The engine roared to life, a comforting sound that drowned out the whispers that still seemed to echo in her ears. She slammed her foot on the accelerator, speeding away from the house, from the darkness, from the whispers, from the chilling horror that had filled that old, cursed dwelling. The drive was a blur, a frantic escape from a nightmare she couldn't quite shake. The rising sun cast long shadows, but Emily couldn't bring herself to appreciate the beauty of the dawn. The image of the shadowy figures, the slithering darkness beneath the children's bed, the Queen of Spades, and Sarah's desperate pleas in her diary replayed relentlessly in her mind, a haunting film reel that threatened to break her sanity. She dropped the children off at their home, her hands still trembling. Lily and Tom, oblivious to the horrors they had narrowly escaped, slept soundly in their beds. The sight of their peaceful faces offered a small measure of solace, a fragile respite from the storm raging within her. But the relief was fleeting, quickly overshadowed by the weight of the secrets she carried. The events of the night before were etched indelibly into her memory, the inexplicable occurrences, the chilling atmosphere, the palpable sense of a malevolent presence. It wasn't just the supernatural occurrences, it was the feeling, the utter dread that had permeated every corner of the house, a terrifying aura that clung to her like a shroud. The diary had revealed a history of terror, a chilling legacy of dark entities that seemed to be inexorably linked to the family. The Queen of Spades was no longer just a playing card, it was a symbol of that legacy, a dark omen of the lurking evil. The following days were a haze of exhaustion, punctuated by moments of intense fear. Sleep offered no escape, her dreams were filled with shadowy figures, whispering voices, and the chilling coldness that had permeated the house. The lingering sense of dread clung to her, an unwelcome companion that followed her everywhere. She found herself constantly glancing over her shoulder, listening for whispers, for any sign of the unseen presence that still seemed to haunt her. Emily knew she could never go back to that house. The thought alone filled her with a gut-wrenching terror. The place was not simply haunted, it was cursed, a locus of malevolent energy that threatened to consume anyone who dared to enter. The secrets buried within its decaying walls were too dark, too terrifying to confront again. The legacy of Sarah's family, a history steeped in supernatural encounters and chilling premonitions, was a burden she could not, and would not, bear. The children, mercifully, seemed oblivious to the terror that had shadowed their night. But Emily knew that the experience had changed her forever. The innocence of childhood, once a comforting shield against the darkness of the world, had been irrevocably shattered. She saw the world differently now, her perception forever altered by her encounter with the malevolent entity that haunted that old house. She tried to talk about it, to confide in friends and family, but the words seemed to catch in her throat, choked by the lingering horror. How could she explain what she had seen, what she had felt? How could she convey the chilling reality of the whispers, the shadows, the palpable sense of malevolence that still clung to her? Her words sounded like the ramblings of a mad woman, her story a tale of unimaginable horror that no one could, or would, believe. So, she retreated into herself, carrying the weight of her secret, the burden of her experience, like a silent, haunting melody that played endlessly in her heart. The world felt different now, more dangerous, more unpredictable. The line between reality and nightmare had become dangerously blurred, and the lingering dread, the chilling memory of the whispers, the shadows, the chilling presence of the entity in the house, became her constant companion, a shadow that would forever haunt the corners of her life. She never returned to the house, and although time eased the immediate terror, a sense of foreboding, of something always just out of sight, forever remained. The escape from the house had been physical, but the escape from the lingering terror remained elusive. The house, and its secrets, remained. Story 2, The Tollbooth Terror. The engine hummed, a low thrum against the oppressive silence of the night. The highway stretched before me, a ribbon of black asphalt cutting through the inky blackness of the countryside. Rain slicked the road, blurring the already indistinct roadside trees into shadowy phantoms. My wipers fought a losing battle against the deluge, smearing the darkness rather than clearing it. I'd been driving for hours, the miles melting into each other in a monotonous blur. The only sound, apart from the rhythmic swish of the wipers and the purr of the engine, was the relentless drumming of the rain on the car's roof. It was the kind of night that bred loneliness, that fostered a sense of unease, a prickling on the skin that spoke of unseen things. I checked my fuel gauge, a knot tightening in my stomach. The needle hovered precariously close to empty. The nearest town, according to my increasingly unreliable GPS, was still another hour away. Frustration gnawed at me, amplified by the isolation and the unnerving darkness. Just as I was resigning myself to the prospect of a potentially dangerous breakdown, I spotted it, a lone toll booth, bathed in the sickly yellow glow of a single, flickering light. It stood in stark isolation, a lonely sentinel guarding the edge of the highway. There were no other buildings in sight, no other cars, just the endless stretch of road, the unforgiving darkness of the woods, and this single, ominous structure. A shiver ran down my spine, a prickle of unease that had nothing to do with the cold rain. This place felt wrong. Hesitantly, I pulled up to the booth. The attendant's window was dark, the interior shrouded in shadow. A silence, thick and heavy, settled between the car and the booth, punctuated only by the drumming of the rain. I tapped my horn, a nervous, hesitant sound in the vast emptiness. No response. I tapped it again, a little louder this time. Still nothing. My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the suffocating stillness. A strange feeling settled over me, a sense of being watched, observed by unseen eyes in the darkness that clung to the edges of my vision. The flickering light cast long, distorted shadows, making the simple structure seem menacing, sinister. I considered driving away, but the thought of running out of fuel on this desolate stretch of highway was far more frightening. Besides, a stubborn refusal to be intimidated by a deserted toll booth won out. I cautiously got out of my car, my footsteps echoing unnaturally loud in the silence. The rain plastered my hair to my face, and the cold bit at my exposed skin. The toll booth itself was dilapidated, paint peeling from its wooden frame. The words toll booth, exact change only were barely visible, almost lost to the ravages of time and weather. I reached for the handle, my fingers brushing against the cold, damp wood. It felt surprisingly smooth, almost oily. A wave of nausea washed over me. It was an unsettling sensation, hard to define but utterly repellent. As I pushed the door open, a gust of cold air rushed out, carrying with it a whiff of something damp and musty, something vaguely earthy. The interior was even darker than I had anticipated, the single light providing barely enough illumination to make out the rough wooden walls and a simple, metal cash box. The air hung heavy with an almost palpable sense of unease. There was nothing here except for dust motes dancing in the feeble light. No attendant, no sign of recent occupancy, nothing to suggest that anyone had been here for a considerable period. Yet, the air was thick with a strange, unsettling energy, a feeling that was difficult to put into words. It was as if the very air vibrated with a low hum of something unseen, something malevolent. A sudden scraping sound made me jump. It came from behind me, from the darkness outside the booth. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. Nothing. Just the relentless rain and the black, inky shadows of the surrounding trees. But the feeling persisted, the uneasy certainty that I was not alone. I decided then that I needed to leave, and I didn't linger. Getting back into my car was like escaping a cold, suffocating grip. As I pulled away from the toll booth, I stole one last glance in the rearview mirror. In the flickering light, I thought I saw something move in the shadows. A flicker of movement, a fleeting impression, but enough to send a fresh wave of icy terror through my veins. The rest of the drive was a blur, my mind racing, my senses heightened. Every shadow seemed to contain a lurking threat, every sound a potential danger. The rain continued to fall, blurring the lines between reality and imagination, fueling the fear that coiled tight in my gut. I reached the town, the lights a welcome beacon in the storm-ravaged night. The sense of relief was intense, almost overwhelming. but the image of the deserted toll booth, the feeling of being watched, the strange, unsettling energy that permeated the place, remained etched in my memory, a haunting reminder of a night I'd rather forget. The experience left me with a profound sense of unease and a lingering suspicion that something far more sinister than a simple deserted toll booth lurked on that lonely stretch of highway. The memory of the oily feel of the handle, the scraping sound, and that fleeting movement in the shadows continued to haunt me long after the rain had stopped and the dawn had broken, leaving a chilling residue of terror. The following days were spent trying to rationalize the experience, to dismiss it as a trick of the light, a product of a weary mind and a lonely road. But the deeper I delved into logical explanations, the more elusive the truth seemed to become. The feeling of unease remained, a persistent shadow that clung to me, whispering doubts and fueling a deep-seated unease. The highway, once a familiar route, now felt charged with a malevolent energy. I avoided the area. I even avoided driving at night, my fear of encountering that unsettling place again far outweighing any desire for a late-night drive. The toll booth, a seemingly insignificant structure, became a symbol of something far greater, a reminder of the unknown terrors that lurk just beyond the boundaries of our understanding. It's a silent warning, a testament to the chilling realities that sometimes lie hidden in the shadows, waiting for the unsuspecting traveler. The feeling of being watched, of something malevolent lingering just out of sight, became a constant companion, a persistent shadow that would follow me long after the details of that horrific night had faded from memory. The experience changed me, and the desolate toll booth remains a place I would rather never return to. The silence in the toll booth was broken not by the sound of an attendant, but by a scraping noise, like fingernails on wood, emanating from the far corner. It was a sound that clawed at the edges of my sanity, a discordant note in the otherwise desolate symphony of the rain. My hand instinctively went to the door handle, my knuckles white against the cold, oily wood. I was about to flee when a figure emerged from the shadows. It wasn't human. Not entirely. The being was tall and gaunt, impossibly thin, its limbs elongated and unsettlingly flexible. Its skin seemed to shimmer, an iridescent film of something that wasn't quite flesh, catching the faint light and shifting colors like oil on water. The face, if it could be called that, was a mask of unsettling features, a wide, expressionless mouth that stretched too far across its face, revealing rows of teeth that seemed far too numerous and far too sharp, eyes that were black pits devoid of any discernible emotion, and an absence of nose. The overall effect was deeply disturbing, a grotesque parody of humanity. It wasn't a creature from a nightmare, not exactly. It was something far stranger, something that existed outside the realm of my comprehension. A chill deeper than the rain pierced me, the cold gripping me in its icy fingers. It spoke, its voice a rasping whisper that seemed to vibrate in my very bones. The toll, it hissed, the sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement. You must pay the toll. I stammered, my tongue feeling thick and clumsy in my mouth. What toll? The absurdity of the situation warred with the primal fear that threatened to overwhelm me. Here I was, in a deserted toll booth on a rain-swept highway, facing a creature that defied description, demanding payment of some unknown toll. The creature extended a skeletal hand, its long fingers tipped with what looked like sharpened bone. In its palm lay a single, smooth, black stone, pulsing with a faint internal light. It was utterly alien, yet strangely compelling. It felt wrong. An instinct, raw and profound, screamed at me to avoid touching it. This, the creature rasped, its voice resonating with an unnerving echo, is the price of passage. I stared at the stone, mesmerized and terrified in equal measure. The pulsing light seemed to hypnotize me, drawing me in despite my better judgment. This wasn't just a strange encounter, this was something profoundly wrong, something that tapped into a primal fear, a dread that transcended the simple fear of the unknown. It felt ancient, something that had been watching the highway for centuries, a silent guardian of the road, waiting for the unsuspecting traveler. My mind raced, trying to find a rational explanation. Was I hallucinating? Was this some elaborate prank? But the intensity of the experience, the sheer visceral terror that gripped me, told me this was far more real than any dream or illusion. This was a reality far more terrifying than I could ever have imagined. The creature's presence filled the small toll booth, a suffocating weight that pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe. I struggled to speak, my throat constricted by fear. I don't understand. The creature tilted its head, a disturbing movement that seemed to dislocate its neck. The black pits that were its eyes seemed to bore into my soul, reading my thoughts, sensing my fear. It was a silent communication, an exchange of dread that transcended language. I felt my fear not as an emotion but as a physical presence, a cold, alien entity invading my body. The toll, it repeated, its voice even more raspy now, is the price of safe passage. Refusal has consequences. The emphasis on the word consequences sent a shiver of true terror down my spine. The unspoken threat hung heavy in the air, thick and suffocating. The stone in its hand pulsed with a stronger light, its dark surface seemingly vibrating with an unseen energy. I was paralyzed, caught between the overwhelming urge to flee and the equally powerful compulsion to understand the nature of this otherworldly encounter. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to run, to escape this horrifying apparition, but the unsettling stone, the unearthly being, held me captive. It was as if my own will was being suppressed, consumed by the creature's alien power. The silence stretched, taut and unbearable, broken only by the relentless drumming of the rain against the roof of the toll booth. The creature seemed to wait patiently, its unnatural stillness more terrifying than any aggressive movement could have been. Its gaze never wavered, its black eyes piercing through me, seeing past my fear into the very depths of my being. I swallowed, my throat dry. What are you?" I managed to whisper, my voice barely audible above the rain. The question hung in the air, unanswered, but the creature's silent response and its unwavering gaze was more terrifying than any reply could have been. It waited. It simply waited. Its patience, its unnatural stillness, was a weapon in itself, a tool of psychological torture. The pulsing stone seemed to grow brighter, the light a sinister beacon in the darkness of the toll booth. In that moment, trapped between the terrifying unknown and the irresistible urge to flee, I made my decision. I couldn't explain it, I couldn't understand it, but I knew, instinctively, that touching that stone, paying whatever toll this creature demanded, would be a far worse fate than running. The risk of confronting this thing, facing its unknown consequences, felt infinitely less terrifying than the chilling certainty I experienced by contemplating the stone's touch. With a sudden surge of adrenaline, I jerked the door open, the cold rain instantly washing over me. I didn't look back, didn't dare to glance at the creature one more time, but the image of its gaunt frame, its unnatural face, and that pulsating stone seared itself into my memory. The chilling rasp of its voice, the unnerving energy of the toll booth, and the unspeakable dread of that encounter echoed in my mind long after I had left the highway far behind. The experience was more than just fear, it was a violation of reality itself, a chilling encounter with something that shouldn't exist, something that left an indelible mark on my soul. I drove on, leaving the haunting memory behind, never to travel that road at night again. The terror wasn't so much of the event itself, but of its implications, what that being was, what it wanted, and the chilling fact that such things could exist in a reality I thought I knew. And the lingering question of what the price of safe passage truly was, remained forever unanswered, a haunting mystery that would continue to gnaw at my conscience. The toll remained unpaid, a debt I would carry for the rest of my life. Even now, the memory of its eyes, empty, black pits, still haunts me in my darkest moments, a chilling reminder of that night at the toll booth. The night I almost paid the ultimate price. The rain hammered against the corrugated metal roof of the toll booth, a relentless percussion that did little to drown out the unsettling sounds emanating from within. It wasn't just the wind whistling through unseen gaps. There was a deeper, more sinister resonance, a low hum that vibrated in my chest, a feeling rather than a sound. It was as if the very structure of the toll booth itself was groaning under some unseen weight, a pressure that pressed down on me, making the confined space feel claustrophobic, stifling. The air hung heavy, thick with a dampness that went beyond mere rain. It carried a chilling scent, something earthy and metallic, like freshly turned soil mixed with the coppery tang of blood. I tried to focus on the task at hand, counting the dwindling supply of change in my wallet, but my concentration kept fracturing, splintering under the relentless assault of the unsettling atmosphere. The flickering fluorescent light above buzzed incessantly, casting long, dancing shadows that writhed and twisted like living things, their movements mimicking the uneasy feeling creeping up my spine. Every creak of the aging wood, every rustle of the nearby vegetation, sent a jolt of adrenaline through my system. I felt watched, observed by unseen eyes in the enveloping darkness beyond the meager illumination of the booth. The toll booth itself felt wrong, somehow. It wasn't just the decrepit state of the building, peeling paint, rusted metal, cracked windows, but an inherent sense of wrongness, a palpable feeling of unease that permeated the very structure. The wood felt strangely cold, even through my thick gloves, and seemed to exude a damp chill that seeped into my bones. It was as if the wood itself absorbed the rain, becoming saturated with the misery of untold stories, secrets whispered on the wind, tragedies played out under the unforgiving glare of the headlights. I glanced at the small, grimy mirror hanging beside the collection box, half expecting to see something reflected in its murky surface, a distorted face, a shadowy figure lurking just out of sight. Instead, I saw only my own tense, fearful expression, the wildness in my eyes mirroring the turmoil within. The reflection felt disconnected, as if it depicted someone else entirely, a stranger lost in a nightmare. A sudden scraping sound, like nails dragging across concrete, tore through the oppressive silence. It came from somewhere deep within the structure of the toll booth, a sound that seemed to reverberate not just in my ears, but throughout my entire being. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the relentless rhythm of the rain. I spun around, my hand instinctively reaching for the pepper spray in my pocket. The shadows in the corners of the booth seemed to deepen, to coalesce, to pulse with a dark energy that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. I could almost feel the eyes watching me from the darkness, peering at me from the unseen corners. It was a palpable feeling, like an icy breath on my neck. The air grew colder, the humid dampness becoming a bone-chilling frost that seemed to emanate from the shadows themselves, clinging to me, seeping into my soul. I strained my eyes, trying to penetrate the darkness, to identify the source of the unsettling sound. But the darkness remained impenetrable, a void filled only with a growing sense of dread, a nameless terror that threatened to overwhelm me. It was as if the shadows themselves were alive, sentient beings with their own will and purpose, feeding on my fear. Then, from the deepest recess of the booth, a faint whisper reached my ears. It was barely audible, lost in the rhythm of the rain, but distinct enough to send a shiver down my spine. It was a wordless sound, a susurrus that seemed to vibrate in my very bones, a sound akin to a sigh of ancient despair. My hand trembled as I reached for the radio, my finger hovering over the emergency button. Should I call for help? Was there anyone out there who could believe what I was experiencing? Or would they simply dismiss it as a trick of the light, a product of my overactive imagination fueled by the lonely, rain-soaked night? The fear of ridicule clashed with the undeniable reality of the unsettling presence that seemed to grow stronger with every passing moment. Another scraping sound, closer this time, made me jump. I whirled around again, only to see nothing but the deepening shadows, the relentless rain, the chilling gloom of the deserted toll booth. But the feeling of being watched, of being surrounded by something sinister, remained. It was as if an unseen force was playing with me, toying with my nerves, testing the limits of my sanity. The silence, once oppressive, now felt pregnant with anticipation, with a silent promise of something horrific about to unfold. The humming intensified, becoming almost deafening. The air itself seemed to vibrate, pulsating with an unseen energy. The fluorescent light above flickered violently, casting grotesque shadows that danced and writhed around the small space, twisting and turning, creating an illusion of movement that was both terrifying and mesmerizing. Suddenly, a gust of wind howled through a crack in the wall, rattling the windows and stirring up a vortex of dust and debris. In the swirling chaos, I caught a glimpse of something, a fleeting shadow, impossibly tall and thin, moving with an unnatural speed and grace. It vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving behind only the lingering chill of its unseen presence and a profound sense of unease. My breath hitched in my throat. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Was it a trick of the light? A figment of my imagination? Or was there truly something else here, something sinister and malevolent, lurking in the shadows, watching me, waiting? The answer, I knew, was far more terrifying than any rational explanation could provide. This wasn't merely a creepy, isolated place. This was something far more profound, something that tapped into an ancient fear, a primal dread that resonated in the very marrow of my bones. The toll booth wasn't just a structure, it was a nexus, a point where the veil between worlds thinned, allowing something otherworldly to seep into our reality. The feeling of dread intensified, becoming a crushing weight that pressed down on me, making it difficult to breathe. The silence, once punctuated by the rain, now seemed utterly empty, void of any comforting sounds. Only the relentless pounding of my own heart filled the oppressive quiet of the toll booth. It was a terrifying lullaby, signaling the approach of something dreadful. The air itself felt heavy with an unspeakable dread, a foreboding that echoed the very essence of the dark, shadowed corner. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the core, that I wasn't alone. Something else was here. Something ancient. Something malevolent. Something that had been waiting a long, long time. And it was waiting for me. The decision to flee solidified in the pit of my stomach, a primal instinct overriding the rational part of my brain that screamed about leaving my post, about the potential consequences. The humming, previously a low drone, had escalated into a deafening roar, a vibration that resonated not just in my ears, but in my teeth, my bones, my very soul. It was a sound that spoke of immense power, of an ancient, malevolent energy unleashed. The fluorescent light above sputtered and died, plunging the toll booth into absolute darkness, a darkness far more terrifying than the gloom of the previous moments. Panic seized me, a cold fist clenching around my heart. I fumbled for the door handle, my fingers clumsy and unresponsive in the sudden black. The handle felt cold, slick with an unnatural moisture, not rain, but something far colder, far more chilling. It felt like I was touching something ancient, something that had lain dormant for centuries, something that had finally awakened. With a desperate heave, I flung the door open, the sudden rush of cold, rain-soaked air stinging my face. The darkness outside felt less threatening than the suffocating presence I had just escaped, a stark contrast to the unseen horrors I'd left behind. The rain, relentless and unforgiving, beat down on me, washing away some of the unseen grime that clung to my skin, but not the chilling memory of the unseen presence within the toll booth. I stumbled back, my feet slipping on the rain-slicked concrete, my breath catching in my throat. I didn't look back, couldn't look back. The image of those shadows, impossibly tall and thin, was burned into my mind, a terrifying tableau that would forever haunt my dreams. The humming persisted, fading slightly with distance, but still audible, a chilling reminder of the malevolent force I had just fled. As I ran, the feeling of being watched lingered, a cold dread that clung to me like a second skin. It wasn't just the darkness that frightened me, it was the sense of being observed, of being hunted by something that transcended the limitations of the physical world. The rain became a blurry torrent, washing over me, as I ran blindly towards the distant lights of the highway, toward the promise of safety, or at least a semblance of it. The adrenaline coursing through my veins fueled my desperate flight, blurring my perception of time and distance. The highway seemed miles away, the road stretching before me like an endless tunnel towards a desperately needed escape. Each pounding footstep was a desperate plea for deliverance, a desperate attempt to outrun the unseen horror that haunted my every step. I didn't dare to slow down, didn't dare to look back, fearing what I might see lurking in the darkness behind me. The feeling of being pursued persisted, a cold, clammy pressure that weighed down my chest, making each breath a struggle. The wind howled, mirroring the turmoil in my soul, and the rain, a relentless downpour, seemed to mock my desperate flight, washing away the physical grime but not the chilling memory of the encounter. Finally, I reached the relative safety of the highway, the distant glow of headlights providing a beacon of hope in the stormy night. The distant roar of engines provided a counterpoint to the echoing silence of my terrifying escape from the toll booth, a welcome distraction from the oppressive dread that still clung to me. But the silence itself felt fraught with danger, the potential for another sudden surge of that eerie humming that had threatened to consume me. The rain began to ease slightly as I reached the relative safety of the highway, but the chilling wind still whipped around me, a constant reminder of the night's events. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, shivering uncontrollably, the lingering chill penetrating my very bones, and not simply from the cold of the storm. This was a deeper, more profound cold, the icy grip of fear and the unseen presence of something far beyond human comprehension. The distant glow of passing vehicles offered a sense of comfort, a reassurance that I wasn't truly alone in this desolate landscape, a reminder that other people existed, that I wasn't completely isolated in the face of unimaginable terror. Yet even the sounds of approaching cars couldn't completely dispel the oppressive fear that continued to press down on me. Slowly, cautiously, I began to walk along the highway, seeking a way to make contact with someone, anyone. Each passing vehicle offered a flickering moment of hope, a chance to seek help, to speak my story before the memories faded, before the terror became something that I could no longer recall. The sheer terror was slowly giving way to a numb state, a state of shock and disbelief, my mind struggling to grasp the reality of what had occurred in that haunted toll booth. Every shadow seemed to twist and writhe, every rustle of leaves sounded like footsteps approaching. Even the distant sounds of nature, which should have provided some sense of comfort and reassurance, seemed to echo with a strange, sinister tone, amplifying the overwhelming sense of dread that still enveloped me. The darkness of the night seemed to conspire with the storm to create an unsettling atmosphere, one that further intensified the haunting images from the toll booth. I finally managed to flag down a passing truck driver, a burly man who, despite his initial skepticism, listened to my tale with a growing sense of unease. He recognized the toll booth I described, a place shrouded in local legends and whispers of strange encounters and disappearances. He'd heard the stories, the hushed tones and veiled warnings, but hadn't believed them until now. His eyes, initially filled with doubt, widened with growing apprehension as I recounted my experience, the chilling details of the encounter, the humming, the shadows, the overpowering sense of dread. His initial skepticism gave way to concern, and then to a shared sense of disbelief and unease. His offer of help was as much a gesture of kindness as a testament to the horrifying reality of my tale. He drove me to the nearest town, his silence punctuated only by the rhythmic hum of the truck's engine, a sound that was oddly comforting in its ordinariness after the terrifying resonance of the toll booth. He dropped me off at a small diner, the warm glow of its interior offering a stark contrast to the cold, rain-soaked night outside. The smell of coffee and frying bacon was a welcome contrast to the damp, earthy smell that still clung to my clothes, a scent that carried with it the lingering presence of that chilling place. The warmth of the diner, the chatter of other patrons, the comforting smell of food, all these simple things provided a welcome counterpoint to the chilling experience I'd endured. But even as I sipped my coffee, the unsettling memories persisted, a cold current beneath the surface of my relief, a constant reminder of the ordeal I had survived. The terror, however, hadn't completely abated. The chilling resonance of the humming was still present in my mind's eye, and I still felt the unseen stare in the darkness, watching me even in the bustling normalcy of the diner. The memories continued to haunt me, echoing in my mind long after the event. It was a testament to the sheer terror I had faced, the impact that the incident had made upon my psyche, an experience that wouldn't easily be forgotten. The world felt irrevocably changed. This small town, with its flickering lights and quiet hum, wouldn't be a haven from that chilling experience. It was just a temporary respite, a brief moment of peace before I had to face the reality of dealing with the haunting echoes of my desperate escape, a reality that would likely haunt me for the rest of my days. The fear was ingrained, a chilling reminder that there were places, times, and forces beyond our comprehension, that some horrors are too real, too chilling, to ever truly escape. The toll booth terror would forever remain a stark and chilling reminder of the boundaries of reality and the terrifying possibility of what lies beyond. The weight of the experience threatened to drown me even amidst the relative safety of the diner. The trauma lingered, a tangible presence in the air itself. The trucker, a man named Dale with hands as rough as bark and eyes that held the weariness of countless nights on the road, listened patiently as I recounted my ordeal. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer platitudes, just nodded occasionally, his gaze fixed on the swirling patterns of the rain outside. When I finished, a long silence stretched between us, broken only by the rhythmic hiss of the diner's coffee machine. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and gravelly. "That old toll booth," he murmured, tracing a circle on the Formica tabletop with a calloused finger. Been saying it for years, that place ain't right. Folks disappear around there. Cars go missing. And that humming, I've heard whispers of it, but never believed it until now. He told me stories, hushed and hesitant at first, then growing bolder as the weight of shared experience eased the tension. Tales of flickering lights, strange shadows seen in the periphery, and a pervasive sense of dread that clung to the area like a shroud. One story stood out, a young woman, a college student, who'd vanished without a trace while driving through the toll booth late one night. Her car was never found. The police investigation had yielded nothing, her disappearance chalked up to a runaway case, a convenient explanation for an inexplicable event. Dale spoke of others too, a truck driver who'd sworn he'd seen a figure standing in the middle of the road, impossibly tall and gaunt, only to find nothing there when he stopped to investigate. A family who'd reported their car malfunctioning inexplicably near the toll booth, only to have the vehicle suddenly start up again and speed away uncontrolled, leaving them stranded in the storm. These were whispers, rumors, the kind of stories that are dismissed as folklore or tall tales, until one confronts the chilling reality of their potential truth. Dale's stories painted a picture far more sinister than my single, terrifying encounter. They suggested a pattern, a consistent presence of something malevolent, something that lingered in the shadows of that desolate stretch of highway, feeding on fear and confusion. The diner's warm glow couldn't fully dispel the icy grip of dread that still clung to me. The coffee tasted bitter, the bacon greasy, and the chatter of other diners felt distant, unreal, like a soundtrack to a movie I wasn't quite a part of. My own story, the details of which I just recounted, felt like a separate entity, a terrifying film reel playing on repeat in the back of my mind. The humming was still there, a low thrum that resonated not in my ears, but deep within my bones, a constant reminder of the unseen force I'd encountered. Dale's account only served to amplify my unease. His tales weren't just local legends, they were echoes of my own experience, corroboration of a reality I desperately wanted to dismiss as a figment of my overactive imagination, a nightmare induced by stress and exhaustion. But the chilling details, the shared experiences, were too precise, too similar to be mere coincidence. As the night wore on, the rain outside lessened to a drizzle, the wind subsiding to a mournful sigh. But the storm within me raged on, a tempest of fear and uncertainty. I questioned everything, my sanity, my perception of reality, and the very nature of the entity I'd confronted. Was it a paranormal phenomenon? A manifestation of mass hysteria? Or something far more sinister, something that defied explanation? Dale offered to drive me to a nearby motel, a gesture of kindness in a world that suddenly felt hostile and unpredictable. The drive was silent, the only sounds the hum of the engine and the rhythmic swish of the wipers. I watched the dark landscape blur past, my mind replaying the events of the night, each detail sharper, more vivid in the quiet solitude of the journey. The motel room was sterile, smelling faintly of bleach and stale cigarettes. It offered little comfort. The shadows seemed to stretch and writhe on the walls, even though the room was relatively well lit. The simple hum of the refrigerator sounded like the unsettling drone from the toll booth, a disquieting reminder of the night's terror. Sleep was a distant prospect. I spent the night wrestling with the implications of what I'd experienced. The stories, the whispers, the shared encounters, they all pointed towards something far beyond my comprehension. The toll booth wasn't simply a gateway between towns, it was a gateway to something else, something dark and ancient, something that preyed on the vulnerable, feeding on their fears and disappearing them into the night. The next morning, I contacted the authorities, hesitantly at first, unsure how they would react to my story. They listened politely, their responses ranging from skepticism to polite dismissiveness. The missing person cases Dale mentioned were cold cases, their files filled with inconclusive findings and dead ends. They were accustomed to such reports, more familiar with mundane explanations than the supernatural. My experience, my encounter at the toll booth, remained unexplained, an anomaly, a chilling footnote in the annals of the unexplainable. The police investigation, though perfunctory, unearthed nothing unusual. No physical evidence suggested any supernatural activity. The hum that had haunted me was dismissed as a possible electrical fault, a malfunction long since repaired. Yet, the cold dread persisted. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of being hunted by something that existed just beyond the veil of reality. The memory of the shadows, the humming, the suffocating sense of dread, these remained as vivid as if the events had taken place only moments before. The unanswered questions lingered, the mystery deepening with each passing day. Was the toll booth truly haunted? Was there something malevolent lurking in the shadows, preying on the unsuspecting? Or had the stress of my work, the late nights, and the relentless pressure of a demanding job driven me to the brink of a psychological break, crafting this chilling tale from the fabric of my own anxiety? Even the rational part of my mind, struggling to find a logical explanation, couldn't fully dismiss the reality of what had happened. The visceral fear, the palpable presence of something unseen, remained. The chilling experience, shrouded in mystery and unanswered questions, was a testament to the chilling line between reality and the unknown, a haunting reminder that some mysteries remain forever unsolved. The toll booth remained, a silent sentinel on the highway, a tangible reminder of a terrifying night, and a haunting testament to the unexplained, leaving an enduring sense of unease and an unsettling mystery to puzzle over. The terror, the fear, the enigma of the toll booth remained a living, breathing presence, forever etching itself into my memory. Story 3: The Haunted Highway. The desolate stretch of highway stretched before us, an endless ribbon of black asphalt swallowed by the encroaching darkness. Our car, a battered Honda Civic affectionately nicknamed the Snail, had sputtered and died with a pathetic whimper, leaving us stranded under a sky choked with angry, swirling clouds. Rain lashed down, blurring the already indistinct landscape into a blurry watercolor of grays and blacks. The only sound louder than the drumming rain was the frantic thump-thump-thump of my own heart. Liam, our designated driver, slammed his fist against the steering wheel, a frustrated groan escaping his lips. "Great," he muttered, his voice tight with annoyance. "Just great. Stranded. In the middle of nowhere. On a night like this." Sarah, ever the optimist, tried to inject some levity into the situation. "Well, at least we have each other," she chirped, her voice barely audible above the storm. But even her forced cheerfulness felt strained, thin as a veil over the growing unease that was settling over us. Mark, usually the quiet one, was unusually agitated, his eyes darting nervously around the deserted landscape. "This isn't right," he whispered, his voice barely a breath. "This road, it feels wrong." He was right. The road felt eerily empty, devoid of any signs of life. No other cars, no distant lights, no sounds except the relentless assault of the rain and wind. The silence was broken only by the occasional crackle of static from the car radio, a ghostly whisper in the storm. Even the usual hum of the power lines seemed absent, replaced by an unsettling quiet that pressed in on us, a suffocating blanket of isolation. We had been driving for hours, our laughter and chatter gradually replaced by a growing silence as the landscape around us had transformed from picturesque countryside into a bleak, foreboding wilderness. The sky had darkened prematurely, the clouds gathering like a malevolent presence, mirroring the rising unease within us. We had all been looking forward to this road trip, a much-needed escape from the relentless pressures of city life. Now, stranded and alone, the idyllic escape was turning into something far more sinister. We tried everything to restart the car, to coax it back to life. We checked the battery, the fuel, the fuses, everything we could think of. Nothing worked. The Snail remained stubbornly inert, a silent testament to our growing despair. As darkness deepened, the temperature plummeted. The rain, now a torrential downpour, soaked us to the bone. The wind howled like a banshee, rattling the car windows and whipping our hair across our faces. We huddled together for warmth, seeking solace in each other's company. But the comfort was fleeting, overshadowed by the growing sense of dread that was slowly squeezing the life out of our hopes. We considered walking to find help, but the thought filled us with a chilling dread. The darkness was absolute, the rain a relentless barrier, and the unseen landscape, stretching before us, held an ominous and unnerving promise of the unknown. The shadows seemed to writhe and twist, taking on grotesque shapes in the flickering light of our mobile phones. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sent shivers down our spines, our imaginations conjuring images of unseen eyes watching us, unseen entities lurking in the shadows. Liam, trying to maintain a semblance of control, suggested we call for help. But the phone signal was weak, sporadic, frequently cutting out, leaving us even more isolated and vulnerable. The intermittent crackle and hisses, followed by abrupt silence, added a new level of terror. Each time the call failed, a fresh wave of icy dread washed over us. As the night wore on, the atmosphere grew thicker, heavier, charged with an unspoken fear. The wind seemed to whisper secrets, the rain to mourn, and the darkness to pulsate with a life of its own. The deserted highway became a stage set for our growing anxieties, a canvas for our fear-filled imaginations to paint scenes of terror. We huddled closer, our whispers barely audible, as a sense of being watched, of being followed, settled heavily upon us. Suddenly, Sarah gasped, pointing a trembling finger towards the far end of the highway. In the distance, a faint light flickered, a fleeting spark of hope in the inky blackness. But as we watched, the light pulsed erratically, growing brighter, then dimmer, its intensity changing in unpredictable rhythms, as if a malevolent entity was playing with our fragile hope. Then, as abruptly as it had appeared, the light vanished. Silence descended once more, heavier, more menacing than before. The desolate highway seemed to sigh, settling back into its eerie stillness. The fleeting hope extinguished, we were left suspended in a state of heightened apprehension, each of us wrestling with our fear and the growing conviction that we were not alone. The hours that followed were a blur of whispered conversations, hushed fears, and uneasy silences punctuated by the relentless onslaught of the storm. We huddled together, our shared fear a fragile bond against the growing darkness. We told stories, mostly to distract ourselves from the creeping dread that was threatening to overwhelm us, each story more chilling than the last. But the stories, while providing temporary relief, only served to amplify the sense of impending doom. The dawn finally arrived, slowly, reluctantly, as if hesitant to pierce the veil of darkness. But the light brought little comfort. The landscape, bathed in the pale light of the rising sun, revealed its true nature, an eerie stillness, a desolate beauty that held a sinister undertone, a silent threat that lingered in the air. Our battered car remained stubbornly dead. We were still stranded, alone, and utterly at the mercy of the deserted highway and whatever lurked within its shadows. The experience left an indelible mark, a chilling reminder of the vulnerability of humanity when faced with the vastness and unforgiving nature of the unknown. The seemingly endless stretch of road, once a symbol of freedom and adventure, became a symbol of fear and isolation, a place where the line between reality and nightmare blurred, leaving us forever haunted by the echoes of a terrifying night. The silence of the highway remained, a testament to the power of the unseen, a reminder of the lurking darkness that exists just beyond the threshold of our perception. The weak, intermittent signal from Liam's phone had finally died, leaving us in absolute silence, broken only by the rhythmic drumming of the rain on the car's roof and the shuddering gusts of wind. The silence, however, wasn't empty. It was thick, heavy, pregnant with an unspoken dread that seemed to seep into our very bones. It was a silence that whispered, a silence that felt more menacing than any storm. Suddenly, a low, guttural growl resonated through the air, a sound so deep it seemed to vibrate within our chests. We all froze, our hearts leaping into our throats. The growl was unlike any animal sound I had ever heard. It was primal, ancient, filled with a chilling malice that sent shivers down my spine. Sarah gasped, clutching my arm, her eyes wide with terror. Mark, his face pale, fumbled for his phone, his hand shaking so violently that he almost dropped it. The growl was followed by a series of unsettling noises, scratching, scraping sounds that seemed to emanate from all around us, from within the car itself, from the dense darkness that surrounded us. It was as if unseen entities were circling us, testing our resolve, probing our fears. The noises were subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but they gradually grew in intensity, creating a dissonant symphony of dread. Each sound, each scrape, each rustle seemed to feed into our mounting fear, painting vivid, terrifying images in our minds. Then, there were the lights. Faint, flickering lights in the distance, dancing erratically on the edges of our vision, as though some unseen entity was playing a perverse game, teasing us with fleeting glimpses of hope, only to snatch them away. Sometimes they were red, like malevolent eyes watching us from the darkness. Other times, they shifted to a sickly green, pulsating in a rhythm that seemed to mirror our own erratic heartbeats. These lights, appearing and disappearing with disconcerting speed, seemed to mock our helplessness, adding another layer to the growing sense of unease. The feeling of being watched intensified. It wasn't just a feeling, it was a palpable presence, a heavy weight in the air, a sense that we were surrounded, observed by something unseen, something malevolent. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, every creak of the car itself, was amplified in our terrified minds, each sound morphing into something more sinister, each whisper of the wind becoming a chilling breath on our necks. We huddled closer, seeking comfort in our shared fear. Our whispered conversations were punctuated by long, uneasy silences, each silence heavier and more oppressive than the last. We tried to distract ourselves with talk, with silly jokes, with anything to break the spell of fear that was slowly tightening its grip, but the laughter felt brittle, forced, a thin veil over the rising tide of dread. Each story we told only served to amplify the fear, painting even more terrifying images in our minds. Hours crawled by. The rain continued its relentless assault, blurring the already indistinct landscape. The wind howled like a tormented soul, its mournful cries adding to the growing sense of despair. The temperature, despite the summer night, dropped precipitously. The chilling dampness clung to us like a shroud, seeping into our bones. We felt frozen, physically and emotionally, trapped in a nightmarish scene from which there seemed no escape. As dawn approached, the unsettling occurrences didn't cease, they merely intensified. The lights in the distance became more frequent, more intense, their erratic movements seemingly more deliberate, more menacing. The strange noises persisted, a relentless soundtrack to our fear. The feeling of being watched remained, a suffocating presence that made it impossible to relax, to rest, to even breathe easily. Even the rising sun, the promise of deliverance, offered little comfort. The ethereal light of dawn seemed to cast long, eerie shadows that danced and writhed like specters, adding to the growing sense of surreal horror. In the dim light of the approaching dawn, I noticed something new: shapes. Dark, indistinct shapes that seemed to form and reform at the edges of my vision. Were they trees? Rocks? Or something else entirely? They were too fluid, too shifting, too unnatural. They moved too quickly for inanimate objects. They seemed to pulse with a faint, internal light, adding to the spectral nature of the night and heightening our fear. They mimicked our movements, appearing to follow us from a distance. Liam, seeing the same shapes, let out a choked sob, the fear finally breaking through the facade of stoicism he had been maintaining. Then, as suddenly as they had begun, the lights vanished, the sounds subsided, and the feeling of being watched abruptly disappeared. The shapes, too, receded back into the darkness, leaving behind only the lingering chill of the night and the oppressive weight of what we had just experienced. The silence that followed wasn't the empty silence of before, but a haunted silence, filled with the echoes of unseen horrors, the residue of a night that had torn a hole in the fabric of our reality. The rising sun revealed the highway in a new, horrifying light. It was still desolate, still eerily empty, but now it held a new, sinister dimension. The landscape, previously simply bleak, now seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, a hidden life that stirred beneath the surface. Every tree, every rock, seemed imbued with a dark sentience. The ordinary features of the landscape appeared to take on a menacing new significance in the pale light of dawn. They seemed to conspire with the darkness, whispering tales of the unseen forces that dwelled within. We waited for help, huddled together, shaking and speechless, our minds reeling from the onslaught of the night's events. The experience transcended fear. It was a shattering of perception, a plunge into a realm of the uncanny, where the boundaries between reality and nightmare dissolved into a terrifying, undefined space. We sat silently awaiting help, our minds grappling with the terrifying reality of what had transpired on that haunted highway. The memory of the night lingered long after the rescue, a chilling reminder of the thin veil between our world and something else, something far darker and more frightening. The haunted highway, once a mere stretch of asphalt, became forever seared into our memories, a place of dread, a symbol of the nightmarish realities that lie just beyond the periphery of our understanding. The silence following the disappearance of the spectral lights and shapes wasn't a relief, it was a different kind of terror. It was the silence of a predator that had withdrawn, not defeated, but biding its time. The oppressive weight in the air remained, thick and suffocating, pressing down on us with the invisible force of a physical burden. We were no longer just cold, we were chilled to the bone, a damp, pervasive chill that went beyond the lingering dampness of the rain. It was a chill that burrowed into our souls, a manifestation of the fear that had taken root. Liam, his face ashen, whimpered softly, his body trembling uncontrollably. Sarah, despite her own obvious distress, reached out to comfort him, her hand resting on his arm, offering a fragile shield against the invisible horrors that still seemed to surround us. Mark, ever the pragmatist, attempted to maintain a semblance of composure, but his frequent glances around, the constant twitching of his eyelids, and the way he kept his hand instinctively near his pocket knife, betrayed his inner turmoil. Suddenly, a twig snapped, somewhere to our left, near the edge of the woods bordering the highway. The sound, innocuous in any other context, sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through us. We all froze, straining our ears, our eyes darting nervously through the gloom. The sound was followed by a low rustling, a sound like dry leaves skittering across the asphalt, but the sound was wrong, unnatural. It was too deliberate, too close, too intentional. Another snap, this time closer, followed by a series of scrapes, as if something heavy and dragging was moving through the undergrowth. The sound was accompanied by a subtle, almost imperceptible change in the air, a shift in the pressure, a feeling of being watched with an intensity that bordered on the unbearable. It felt as if the very air around us vibrated with a malevolent energy, a tangible aura of dread. Then we saw it. Or, rather, we saw the hint of it, a fleeting glimpse at the edge of the woods, a shape. It wasn't clear, but it was definitely a shape, a large, dark, vaguely humanoid silhouette that moved with an unnatural fluidity, gliding rather than walking. It disappeared back into the shadows as quickly as it appeared, leaving us trembling, our breath held captive in our chests. The feeling of being watched intensified, becoming unbearable. It was no longer a subtle presence, it was an overwhelming sense of being surrounded, encircled, targeted. Every fiber of our being screamed at us to flee, to run, but a primal fear, a paralyzing dread, held us rooted to the spot, our bodies frozen in a tableau of terror. We were trapped in a macabre game of cat and mouse, the unseen hunter playing with its prey, toying with our emotions, testing our limits. The feeling of its proximity was almost tangible. We could feel the invisible weight of its gaze, the malevolent intention behind it. The night air grew colder, if that was even possible, the temperature plummeting to a level that felt inhuman. The wind, which had been a mournful howl, became a vicious, biting gale, whipping through the trees, carrying with it whispers that seemed to penetrate our very minds, filling our thoughts with images of unspeakable horrors. It was as if the wind itself had become a sentient entity, an accomplice to the unseen predator that haunted the highway. The silence that followed the initial sighting was far more frightening than the noises had been. It was a heavy, oppressive silence, broken only by the frantic pounding of our hearts and the occasional gasp for air. The silence stretched on, an agonizing eternity, every second filled with the unspoken terror of the unknown. As the first rays of dawn touched the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of pale light, a new horror emerged. The shapes reappeared, not just at the edges of our vision this time, but closer, more defined. They were tall, gaunt figures, shrouded in darkness, their features obscured by shadows, yet somehow radiating an aura of immense evil. They moved silently, gliding through the undergrowth, their movements unnervingly fluid and quick, their presence a chilling confirmation of our worst fears. They seemed to be drawn to us, their movements deliberate, their purpose clear. They didn't seem to be trying to hide. Their slow, almost taunting approach, a silent parade of terror, was designed to instill maximum fear. The entities moved like phantoms, their forms wavering and shifting, almost imperceptible at times, then suddenly becoming clear, only to dissolve once more into the background. They were both present and absent, real and unreal, adding a layer of surreal horror to the situation. Their movements mimicked ours, their actions seeming to mirror and anticipate our every move, emphasizing our powerlessness in the face of this overwhelming and supernatural threat. Our attempts to communicate were reduced to gasps and choked sobs. We were paralyzed by fear, our minds reeling from the relentless onslaught of horror. The fear was not merely physical, it was a mental and spiritual assault, a violation of our very essence. The rising sun cast long shadows, stretching and contorting the shapes, making them appear even more monstrous and menacing. The light seemed to amplify their ethereal nature, highlighting the unnatural fluidity of their movements, reinforcing the growing sense of the uncanny. Even the promise of daylight offered no comfort. The dawn, instead of heralding hope, simply unveiled a more terrifying reality. The figures seemed to feed on our fear, their forms growing more distinct, their presence more palpable with each passing moment. They did not attack, but their mere presence was enough to crush our spirits, to drain us of all hope. We were trapped, surrounded, and utterly helpless against this supernatural onslaught. Just as suddenly as they had appeared, they vanished. One moment they were there, their chilling presence filling the air with dread. The next, they were gone, leaving behind only the lingering chill of their presence, the echoes of their silent movements, and the devastating weight of our complete powerlessness. The silence that followed was not the empty silence of before, it was a haunted silence, filled with the residue of their chilling presence, a silence that screamed of unseen horrors and the terrifying truth that we had been dangerously close to a realm far beyond our comprehension. The sun rose higher, casting its light on the desolate highway. The horrifying experience we had endured seemed to have left an invisible mark on the landscape itself. The world seemed altered, tainted by the malevolent energies we had encountered. The trees, the rocks, the very asphalt beneath our feet seemed to vibrate with a malevolent energy, their ordinary features transformed into a sinister, menacing panorama. The rescue arrived hours later, a welcome sight that broke the spell of terror. We were helped into the police car, our bodies still trembling, our minds still reeling from the night's events. The police officers, though professional, couldn't help but look at us with a mixture of disbelief and apprehension. They had heard whispers of the haunted highway, but nothing prepared them for the raw terror etched on our faces, the palpable fear radiating from us like a heat signature. The haunted highway remained a place of dread, a chilling reminder of the night we encountered the unseen horrors that lurk beyond the veil of reality. The memory of that night, the lingering sense of being watched, the haunting images of the spectral figures, would forever be etched into our minds, a constant reminder of the fragility of our world, and the terrifying power of the unseen. We had survived, but the experience left a deep scar, a testament to the horrors that lie just beyond the boundaries of our perception, ready to snatch us into the abyss of the unknown. The journey had changed us forever, leaving behind an indelible mark of a darkness so profound it could redefine our understanding of fear. The sun, a weak, watery disk struggling to pierce the oppressive gloom, offered little comfort. Instead of dispelling the darkness, it seemed to highlight it, throwing long, distorted shadows that danced and writhed like the spectral figures themselves. The air remained thick with an unnatural chill, a palpable sense of dread clinging to us like a shroud. We were no longer merely afraid, we were consumed by a primal terror that clawed at our sanity. Our initial attempts to flee were futile. The entities, for lack of a better term, seemed to anticipate our every move. As we stumbled towards the relative safety of the main road, a new wave of terror washed over us. The figures were no longer just lurking in the shadows, they were moving amongst us, their presence a suffocating weight that pressed down on our chests, stealing our breath, crushing our will to resist. Sarah, always the strongest, the most level-headed of us, was the first to crack. A piercing shriek tore through the silence, a sound of pure, unadulterated terror that echoed through the desolate landscape. Her scream was not a cry for help, but a primal scream of anguish, a desperate release of pent-up fear. The sound, sharp and raw, seemed to energize the entities, their movements growing faster, more erratic. They were closing in. Liam, already on the verge of collapse, crumpled to the ground, his whimpers now choked sobs. Mark, his face a mask of grim determination, tried to pull Sarah back, but she was a wild thing, a creature cornered and fighting for survival. She thrashed and struggled, her movements frantic and desperate. The entities seemed to relish her distress, their forms swirling and shifting around her, their movements mimicking her own, taunting her, mocking her struggle. Mark, realizing that we were hopelessly outnumbered and outmatched, made a desperate decision. He pulled out his pocket knife, the glint of the blade catching the weak sunlight, and lunged at the nearest entity. It was a reckless act, a futile gesture against a force far beyond our comprehension. But it was all we had. The knife passed harmlessly through the figure, as if it were nothing more than a wisp of smoke. The entity didn't react. It simply continued its unsettling dance, its form shifting and reforming around Mark, its presence a cold, suffocating weight. His bravado crumbled, replaced by a terrifying realization. We were dealing with something beyond the limits of human understanding, something that defied the laws of nature, something that fed on our fear. The attack had only enraged the entities. Their forms solidified, becoming more tangible, more menacing. They advanced, their movements swift and silent, their purpose clear, to break us, to consume us, to feed on our terror. The air crackled with malevolent energy, the temperature plummeting to a point where even the thin layer of clothing we wore offered no protection. We fought back, driven by a desperate will to survive. We lashed out, striking blindly at the amorphous forms, our fists meeting only air, our shouts swallowed by the oppressive silence of the haunted highway. We were like insects swatting at a storm, our efforts pathetic, our fate sealed. The entities closed in, their cold, lifeless touch sending shivers down our spines. They didn't inflict physical harm in the traditional sense. Instead, they drained us, siphoning away our strength, our will, our very essence. A wave of despair washed over us, a crushing weight that threatened to drown us in the abyss of hopelessness. Yet, even as our physical and mental strength ebbed away, a flicker of hope remained. It was a faint spark, a tiny ember in the face of overwhelming darkness, but it was enough. It was the shared understanding, the bond of friendship, that had held us together through countless hardships, that had kept our spirits alive amidst the encroaching despair. In a desperate attempt to break the cycle of relentless terror, Mark stumbled upon a half-buried rock, roughly the size of a small boulder. He hurled it with all his remaining strength, not at any one entity but into the heart of the swirling vortex of darkness that had encircled us. The stone disappeared into the swirling mass, vanishing without a trace. In that instant, the oppressive weight lifted, the malevolent energy dissipating like mist in the sun. The spectral figures, their forms flickering and wavering, retreated into the shadows, their movements losing their unsettling fluidity, replaced by a hesitant, almost reluctant withdrawal. The cold, chilling air began to warm, the sense of dread gradually subsiding, replaced by an unsettling quietude. We lay there, exhausted, trembling, our bodies racked with pain and fear. The experience had left us scarred, changed, broken. But we were alive. We had survived. The haunted highway had claimed countless victims, but somehow, against all odds, we had cheated death. As the first rays of the morning sun fully broke through the gloom, casting a golden light upon the desolate landscape, we saw them, the first signs of hope, the flashing lights of approaching vehicles, sirens wailing in the distance. Rescue had arrived. But even as we were being helped into the waiting ambulances, the chilling memory of our ordeal remained, a brand seared onto our souls. The haunted highway had left its mark, a chilling reminder of the powerlessness of humanity in the face of the truly supernatural. We had escaped, but the abyss we had glimpsed would forever haunt our dreams, a dark secret shared between friends who had stared into the face of oblivion and lived to tell the tale. The silence that followed our rescue was heavy with unspoken trauma. The journey back to civilization, the subsequent medical examinations and police interviews, were a blur. The world we re-entered seemed somehow different, muted, as though the vibrancy of life had been diminished by the horror we had witnessed. The stark, brutal reality of our near-death experience sank in slowly, its impact both profound and shattering. The police investigation was thorough, yet ultimately fruitless. The officers, experienced in handling the bizarre and the inexplicable, were left bewildered. No physical evidence, no witnesses, nothing but our collective testimony to support our incredible story. They labeled it a psychological episode, a shared delusion brought on by stress, isolation, and the unforgiving harshness of the environment. But we knew better. We had seen it, felt it, lived it. The chilling truth of our encounter remained, a stark and terrifying reminder of the hidden horrors that lurked just beyond the edges of our perception. The haunted highway remained a place of dread, a chilling testament to the fragility of human existence and the boundless power of the unseen. The memory of that night, The lingering chill, the haunting images, these would forever be a part of us, a shared secret binding us together in an unbreakable bond forged in the crucible of terror. We had faced the unspeakable and survived. But the price of our survival was etched deep within us, a chilling reminder of the night we walked the haunted highway and stared into the abyss. The battered ambulance lurched and swayed, each jarring movement a fresh stab of pain in our already ravaged bodies. The world outside was a blur of flashing lights and indistinct shapes, a stark contrast to the chilling clarity of the haunted highway. Silence, a heavy, suffocating blanket, had settled over us, broken only by the rhythmic wail of the sirens and the occasional groan from one of us. We were three survivors adrift in a sea of trauma, our shared experience a silent and visible bond binding us together. Sarah, her eyes wide and unfocused, stared blankly out the window, her breathing shallow and ragged. The vibrant energy that had once characterized her was gone, replaced by a hollow emptiness that chilled me to the bone. Liam, huddled in the corner, trembled uncontrollably, his body racked with silent sobs. He clutched a worn teddy bear, a childish comfort in the face of unimaginable terror, his gaze fixed on the floor, his expression a mask of profound shock and despair. Mark and I exchanged a weary glance. The relief of escape was palpable, yet overshadowed by the crushing weight of what we had endured. The sheer exhaustion was overwhelming. The physical wounds, though superficial, were nothing compared to the deep, gaping wounds that had been carved into our souls. The memory of the spectral figures, their chilling presence, their suffocating aura, clung to us like a second skin. The hospital was a chaotic blur of flashing lights, sterile smells, and hushed whispers. We were separated, subjected to a battery of tests and examinations, each poke and prod a jarring reminder of our ordeal. The doctors, though professional and sympathetic, seemed baffled by our accounts, their expressions ranging from skeptical amusement to concerned bewilderment. Our descriptions of the entities, the unnatural chill, the inexplicable events, sounded like the ravings of the insane, and I couldn't blame them for their disbelief. How could anyone believe us? How could we even believe ourselves? The police arrived later, their presence a stark intrusion into the sterile environment of the hospital. The lead detective, a grizzled veteran with weary eyes, listened patiently, his expression impassive, as we recounted our terrifying experience. He asked probing questions, attempting to uncover inconsistencies, to find a rational explanation for our story. But there was no rational explanation. Our tale was a tapestry of inexplicable events, an unnerving blend of the surreal and the terrifying. The detective's skepticism was palpable, yet he couldn't dismiss our story entirely. The consistency in our accounts, the shared details, the raw emotion etched on our faces, left him with no other option. However, the lack of physical evidence, the absence of any corroborating witnesses, left him with little to go on. The case was officially closed as unexplained, filed away in the vast archives of the unexplained, another unsolved mystery added to the ever-growing list of the inexplicable. The following days were a haze of therapy sessions, medical checkups, and endless paperwork. The media frenzy that followed our ordeal was intense, their sensationalized headlines and relentless questioning adding another layer of stress and anxiety to our already fragile mental state. We were branded the highway haunts, our story transformed into a sensationalized spectacle, a twisted tale of terror played out for public consumption. We were the lucky ones, the survivors. But our survival had come at a price. The scars we carried were not just physical. They were deep, psychological wounds, etched into the very fabric of our being. The nightmares began almost immediately, vivid, terrifying recreations of our terrifying encounter. We were haunted by the cold, lifeless touch of the entities, their suffocating presence, their unsettling dance in the shadows. The screams, Sarah's piercing cry of terror, echoed in our minds, a haunting soundtrack to our troubled sleep. Our friendship, once a source of strength and support, was now burdened by the shared trauma of our ordeal. We were bound together by a horrifying experience that had forever altered our perception of reality, of safety, of ourselves. We were three individuals, forever changed, forever linked by the chilling events of that night. The isolation was profound. The world, once a vibrant tapestry of sights, sounds, and emotions, had become muted, devoid of color and life. The joy of simple pleasures was gone, replaced by a pervasive sense of unease, a constant state of heightened awareness, a perpetual fear of the unseen. We saw shadows in every corner, heard whispers in every rustle, felt a cold dread whenever darkness fell. We tried to move on, to resume our lives, to put the horrors of that night behind us. But the memory lingered, a persistent shadow clinging to our every thought, every action. We were forever marked by our ordeal, our lives irrevocably altered by our encounter on the haunted highway. Years later, the memory of that night remains as sharp and vivid as if it happened yesterday. The chilling images still flicker in my dreams, the spectral figures dancing in the shadows, their cold, lifeless touch sending shivers down my spine. We never spoke much of it, but the unspoken bond remained, a testament to our shared experience, a haunting reminder of the night we stared into the abyss and lived to tell the tale. The haunted highway remains a place of dread, a desolate stretch of road forever stained by the horrors we witnessed. It is a chilling testament to the fragility of human life, the vulnerability of our perception, and the terrifying power of the unseen. The story remains, etched not only in our memories but also in the collective consciousness of the few who have heard our tale, a stark warning of the horrors that lurk just beyond the edges of our understanding. We escaped, yes, but we carry the scars of that night, a chilling reminder that some experiences transcend the boundaries of rationality, that some encounters leave indelible marks on the soul. The haunted highway claimed a part of us that night, leaving us forever changed, forever bound by the chilling secrets we carry within our hearts. And in the quiet hours, when darkness falls, we still hear the whispers, a haunting echo of that unforgettable night. The fear remains, a constant companion, a chilling reminder of the power of the unseen, a power that transcends our understanding, a power that can only be whispered about in hushed tones, in the darkest corners of our hearts. The haunting remains. The highway still whispers. Story 4, The Shadow in the Attic. The old house groaned under the weight of the afternoon sun, its timbers sighing like weary lungs. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light that pierced the gloom of the attic's single, grimy window. 10-year-old Lily, a whirlwind of restless energy usually contained within the bright confines of her new home, found herself drawn to this forgotten space. The attic was a siren's call, whispering promises of adventure and secrets. Her parents, preoccupied with unpacking and the endless tasks of settling into a new life, hadn't noticed her disappearance. The attic door, a warped monstrosity of aged wood and peeling paint, creaked open with a sound like a dying animal. Lily hesitated for a moment, a flicker of apprehension in her bright eyes. The air that rushed out was thick with the smell of damp earth and decaying wood, a perfume of age and neglect that prickled her nostrils. It was darker than she'd expected, a claustrophobic space choked by shadows that seemed to writhe and shift in the periphery of her vision. She switched on her flashlight, the beam cutting through the gloom, revealing a landscape of forgotten things. Trunks, their leather cracked and faded, lay scattered across the floor like fallen giants. Their brass clasps gleamed dully in the beam of Lily's light, promising untold treasures or perhaps chilling secrets. Cobwebs, thick as shrouds, draped over every surface, shimmering with a ghostly luminescence. The air hung heavy with the scent of dust, decay, and something else, something subtly sinister, a scent that clung to the back of her throat like a phantom taste. It was a smell that spoke of years of silence, of secrets kept, of forgotten memories. Lily's footsteps echoed in the vast emptiness, the sound amplified by the high-pitched whine of the light beam. She navigated the treacherous path of forgotten furniture, a chipped rocking chair, its painted surface peeling like sunburnt skin, a dilapidated wardrobe, its doors hanging ajar, revealing an inky black abyss within. Each object seemed to carry the weight of years of solitude, the silent witnesses to a life lived and then forgotten. She ran a hand across the dusty surface of a worn wooden chest, her fingers tracing the faint carvings on its lid. The wood felt cold and strangely smooth beneath her touch, almost alive. A shiver traced its way down her spine, a prickle of unease that had nothing to do with the chill of the attic air. She opened the chest cautiously, the hinges groaning in protest. Inside, nestled amongst layers of yellowed linen, was a collection of old photographs, their images blurred by time and decay. Faces, frozen in moments of joy and sorrow, stared back at her from the depths of the past. The photographs seemed to pulse with a strange energy, an unseen current that thrummed beneath their faded surfaces. Lily felt a sudden rush of dizziness, a strange sensation of displacement, as if she were being pulled into the past, into the lives of the people in those pictures. She quickly shut the chest, a wave of nausea washing over her. The shadows in the corners of the attic seemed to deepen, to press closer, watching her with unseen eyes. She moved on, her flashlight beam dancing across the attic's cluttered floor. She found a stack of old books, their spines crumbling, their pages brittle and yellowed with age. The titles were illegible, their words lost to the relentless march of time. She picked up one, its cover barely clinging to the spine, and cautiously opened it. The pages were filled with a spidery script, a language she didn't recognize, a cryptic message written in faded ink. The words seemed to hum with a hidden energy, a silent vibration that resonated deep within her bones. As Lily examined the strange script, a chill, colder than the attic's damp air, settled upon her. She felt a presence, a shadowy entity that seemed to watch her from the darkness. She glanced around, but saw nothing. Yet the feeling persisted, the weight of unseen eyes pressing down upon her, suffocating her, filling her with a sense of primal fear. She was not alone. A floorboard creaked behind her. Lily spun around, her flashlight beam catching on a shadowed corner. Nothing. Just the swirling dust motes dancing in the faint light. Her heart hammered against her ribs, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She wanted to leave, to escape the suffocating darkness of the attic, but an unseen force seemed to hold her in place. A strange compulsion, a morbid curiosity, kept her rooted to the spot. She decided to explore the furthest corner of the attic, a space shrouded in almost impenetrable shadow. As she approached, the air grew colder, the shadows thicker, the pressure on her chest intensifying. She felt a wave of nausea, a cold dread that settled in her stomach like a lead weight. The air itself seemed to vibrate with a low hum, a frequency too low for her ears to register but somehow felt deep within her bones. She pushed her way through a curtain of cobwebs, her flashlight cutting through the darkness, revealing a small, wooden door hidden beneath a pile of discarded furniture. She carefully moved the debris aside, revealing a narrow, wooden stairway leading down into darkness. A wave of vertigo washed over her. She hesitated. She didn't know what lay beneath, but a strange compulsion drew her forward, a morbid fascination, a desire to know what secrets were hidden in the darkness below. She carefully descended the stairs, her flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The air grew heavier, the darkness more profound. She felt a palpable sense of unease, a feeling that she was being watched, followed. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the rhythmic squeak of her shoes on the wooden steps and the erratic thump-thump-thump of her heart against her ribs. The stairs ended in a small, damp cellar. Lily's flashlight beam danced across the rough-hewn walls, revealing empty shelves, dusty barrels, and cobweb-draped tools. The air hung heavy with the smell of damp earth and something else, something faintly metallic, a scent that brought to mind the chill of a grave. She felt a distinct chill, even though the air was not cold. It was the kind of cold that settled deep in her bones, a cold that had nothing to do with the temperature but spoke of a place beyond the realm of the living. The shadows danced and shifted in the corners, swirling and coalescing into indistinct shapes that sent shivers down her spine. A low, guttural sound echoed from the depths of the cellar, a sound that seemed to come from the very walls themselves. Lily felt a sudden overwhelming sensation of dread. Her body trembled uncontrollably. She was no longer simply scared, but terrified, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She whirled around, the beam of her flashlight cutting through the shadows, desperate to find the source of the sound, desperate to identify the unseen presence that pressed down upon her. But she found nothing, only the swirling shadows and the oppressive darkness of the cellar. Turning, she began to climb back up the steps, her body shaking, her breath coming in ragged gasps, the chilling sounds echoing in her ears, intensifying with each step. She ran back up the stairs, her heart hammering against her ribs, her mind racing, struggling to reconcile what she had seen and heard with the rational world she knew. The shadows seemed to stretch and writhe behind her, as if trying to pull her back into the darkness. She stumbled, nearly falling, but scrambled to her feet and ran as fast as her legs would carry her up the stairs and into the relative safety of the attic. Emerging into the dusty sunlight of the attic, she felt as if she had escaped from a nightmare. She quickly closed the cellar door, her hands trembling, her heart pounding, and she ran from the attic, leaving behind the secrets that lay buried beneath the floorboards, leaving behind the unseen entities that lurked in the shadows. The house seemed to sigh with relief as she fled, as if releasing the tension and unease she had brought to it. The attic remained silent, its secrets undisturbed, its shadows patiently waiting for another unsuspecting soul to dare to enter its desolate domain. Lily ran, her only thought escape, her only wish to forget the horrors she had witnessed and never return. Gasping for breath, Lily stumbled back into the main attic space, the echoing silence of the cellar replaced by the familiar, though equally unsettling, creaks and groans of the old house. Her flashlight beam, trembling in her hand, danced wildly across the scattered debris, illuminating the familiar chaos of forgotten trunks, decaying furniture, and cobweb-laden shadows. The adrenaline coursing through her veins slowly began to recede, replaced by a chilling wave of nausea and a bone-deep dread that clung to her like a shroud. She hadn't meant to go into the cellar. The small, hidden door had simply appeared, a dark invitation whispered in the dust and shadows. Now, the memory of the guttural sounds, the metallic scent, and the unnerving presence that seemed to emanate from the very stones of the cellar, replayed in her mind like a macabre film reel. She had to escape, to get away from the oppressive weight of the house's secrets. But a strange compulsion, a morbid curiosity, held her captive, preventing her from simply running. Her eyes fell upon the wooden chest she had opened earlier, the one containing the faded photographs. A shiver ran down her spine as she approached it once more. The strange energy she had sensed before was amplified now, resonating with the tremors of her own fear. This time, instead of photographs, she noticed something else nestled within the yellowed linen. A small, intricately carved wooden box, no larger than her hand, lay half hidden beneath a pile of the aged photos. With trembling fingers, she lifted the small box from the chest. It was heavy for its size, and cool to the touch. The wood was dark, almost black, and polished smooth, as if it had been handled countless times over the years. Intricate carvings covered its surface, depictions of strange, swirling patterns and unsettling symbols that seemed to shift and change as she looked at them. They weren't like anything she'd ever seen before, they seemed to writhe and pulse before her eyes, like living things. A sense of foreboding washed over her, a cold fear that went beyond the simple fright of the cellar. Hesitantly, she opened the box. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, lay a collection of unsettling objects. First, a tarnished silver locket, its surface etched with a single, cryptic symbol identical to those on the wooden box. The locket was cold to the touch, and when she opened it, she found not a portrait, but a small, dried flower, brittle and brown, emitting a faint, musty scent. Next, she saw a small, intricately carved bone, its surface worn smooth with age. It felt strangely warm to the touch, a stark contrast to the cold silver locket. There were strange markings on it, 2 runes, perhaps? Or something older, stranger, something that resonated with a primal fear she couldn't comprehend. The bone felt alive in her hand, a faint pulse beating beneath her fingertips. Finally, at the bottom of the box, she found a single, faded photograph. Unlike the others, this one was pristine, untouched by time and decay. It showed a young woman, her face obscured by shadow, but her eyes, piercing, intense, and unsettlingly alive, stared directly at Lily. A chill colder than the attic air ran down her spine. The woman in the photograph seemed to be looking right through her, seeing into the very depths of her soul. She felt a sudden, inexplicable connection to this woman, a sense of kinship and dread all at once. The photograph pulsed with a strange energy, mirroring the feeling she'd had with the chest. Lily felt dizzy again, the unsettling sensation of displacement she'd experienced earlier returning with a vengeance. The air grew thick, the shadows seemed to press closer, their unseen eyes boring into her. She slammed the box shut, the metallic click echoing in the silent attic. She had to leave, she had to escape, but the weight of the house's secrets held her in its grasp, drawing her back towards its dark heart. She examined the locket again, turning it over and over in her hands. The single, enigmatic symbol etched on its surface seemed to pulse with a faint inner light, an almost imperceptible luminescence that hinted at something beyond her comprehension. She felt the cold silver against her skin, a chilling reminder of the cellar's damp, grave-like atmosphere. She considered the bone, its smooth surface still radiating a strange warmth against her palm. It was impossibly smooth, yet it felt ancient, as if it had been crafted eons ago. The strange markings etched upon it whispered of forgotten rituals, of ancient rites performed in the darkness. The bone seemed to resonate with a low hum, a vibration that seemed to travel directly to her bones. The woman in the photograph haunted her. Her eyes, piercing and full of sorrow and unspoken secrets, seemed to follow Lily even when she averted her gaze. The woman seemed both familiar and utterly alien, her face hidden in the photograph's shadows but her presence overwhelmingly powerful. Lily felt an irresistible urge to know more about this woman, to understand the secrets hidden within the family's shadowy past. The photograph seemed to draw her into a world beyond her own, a world of darkness and despair. The attic, once a place of childhood curiosity, had transformed into a sinister labyrinth of forgotten memories and hidden horrors. Every object, every shadow, seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, a silent testament to the dark secrets buried within the house's aging walls. The weight of the past pressed down upon her, a suffocating burden that threatened to crush her. Lily looked around at the decaying remnants of a bygone era, the forgotten relics of a life she didn't understand. Yet the disturbing contents of that small box, the locket, the bone, and the photograph, spoke to her in a language she instinctively understood, a language of dark secrets and hidden dread. It seemed the house itself was trying to communicate something, to reveal a long-buried history filled with sorrow, loss, and something far more sinister. As the late afternoon sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the attic floor, Lily knew she couldn't stay. The secrets contained within the wooden box were far more unsettling than the creaks and groans of the old house. They were a glimpse into a history far more terrifying than the shadows that danced in the corners, a history she felt instinctively drawn to unravel, yet simultaneously terrified to face. She gathered her courage and resolved to escape not only the house, but to also delve deeper into the secrets that lay buried within its very foundations. The mystery that was her new home had just gotten much, much worse. The shadows were no longer just in the attic, they were inside the box, and somehow, inside her. The house, it seemed, was far from done with her yet. The silence of the attic, broken only moments ago by the frantic thump of Lily's heart, was now punctuated by a series of unsettling sounds. At first, they were faint, almost imperceptible, a scratching, a rustling, like something small and unseen skittering across the dusty floorboards. Lily froze, her breath held captive in her chest, every nerve ending screaming a silent warning. The objects in the box, the locket, the bone, the photograph, seemed to hum with a low, resonant thrumming, as if in response to the noises. Her earlier fear was now amplified tenfold, a paralyzing dread that made her muscles tense and her skin crawl. The scratching grew louder, more insistent, accompanied by a low, guttural moan that seemed to emanate from the very depths of the house. It wasn't the creaking and groaning of settling timbers, this was something different, something malevolent. The air grew colder, the shadows in the corners deepening, seeming to writhe and pulse with an almost palpable energy. The unsettling feeling of displacement returned, stronger than ever before, and Lily felt a rising sense of panic. She was trapped, surrounded by the house's oppressive atmosphere, its silent secrets whispering threats in her ear. She clutched the wooden box, its smooth, cold surface a stark contrast to the clammy sweat on her palms. The symbols carved into its surface seemed to writhe and shift before her eyes, their unsettling patterns swirling and morphing in the dim light of her flashlight. The woman in the photograph, her face still obscured by shadows, seemed to stare at her with an unnerving intensity, her eyes burning into Lily's soul. The dried flower in the locket seemed to emanate a strange, musty scent, a chilling perfume that mingled with the dust and decay of the attic. The sounds intensified. The scratching became a frantic clawing, the guttural moans evolving into a series of chilling whispers, unintelligible yet laced with an unmistakable tone of malice. Lily's flashlight beam danced nervously across the attic's shadowy recesses, searching for the source of the noises, but finding only more unsettling darkness. Each creak of the old house, each groan of the timbers, seemed to amplify the sounds, creating a terrifying symphony of dread. She tried to rationalize the noises, to explain them away as the effects of the old house settling, the wind whistling through cracks in the walls, rats scurrying in the rafters. But deep down, a primal instinct screamed at her, a chilling certainty that these were no ordinary sounds. They were warnings, messages from the house's hidden past, and their growing intensity spoke of an impending horror. The temperature plummeted. A wave of icy air swept through the attic, raising the hairs on Lily's arms and sending shivers down her spine. The shadows seemed to coalesce, forming shapes that shifted and danced at the edge of her vision. Her heart pounded in her chest, a frantic drumbeat against the rising tide of fear. She was sure something was watching her, something unseen, something malevolent, and it was getting closer. The whispers grew clearer, morphing into indistinct words that brushed against the edge of her hearing. They seemed to know her name, calling to her from the darkness, beckoning her towards the heart of the house's sinister secrets. The feeling of being watched intensified, a cold dread that paralyzed her, leaving her rooted to the spot, unable to move, unable to scream. Desperate, she fumbled for her phone, her fingers trembling uncontrollably. She tried to dial 911, but her hands were so shaky that she couldn't even find the correct numbers on the screen. She dropped the phone, the clatter echoing in the suffocating silence that followed the chilling whispers. The noises returned with renewed intensity, a crescendo of scratching, clawing, and whispering that filled the attic with a bone-chilling terror. Suddenly, a gust of wind rattled the attic window, flinging it open with a violent crash. A shadow, vast and inky black, swept across the room, extinguishing her flashlight in an instant. Lily screamed, a raw, primal sound of terror, but her cry was swallowed by the darkness and the unrelenting onslaught of unsettling sounds. She felt a cold presence near her, something intangible yet undeniably real, its icy breath ghosting against her skin. The house seemed to come alive, the walls groaning and creaking, the floorboards groaning beneath an unseen weight. Lily scrambled backward, her hands outstretched, desperately searching for something, anything, to hold on to. She stumbled over a pile of forgotten trunks and collapsed to the floor, the icy floor sending a shock of cold through her body. The darkness was absolute, a suffocating blanket that smothered her senses. The sounds continued, however, becoming a chaotic blend of scratching, clawing, and whispering, a monstrous cacophony that filled the attic with unbearable terror. Lily huddled on the floor, her body trembling uncontrollably, her mind racing in a frantic attempt to make sense of the horrors that surrounded her. The attic, once a place of childhood wonder, had become a chamber of unspeakable dread, a horrifying gateway into the dark heart of the house's secrets. Time seemed to stretch and warp, the minutes stretching into an eternity of fear and suspense. The intensity of the sounds ebbed and flowed, rising to terrifying crescendos, only to fall back into chilling silences that seemed far more menacing. The shadows danced and shifted, taking on monstrous shapes that threatened to engulf her. Lily felt a desperate sense of hopelessness, a paralyzing fear that threatened to consume her entirely. Then, as suddenly as they had begun, the noises ceased. A complete and utter silence descended upon the attic, heavier, more oppressive than the sounds had been. The silence was so profound, so absolute, that it was almost unbearable. Lily lay still, rigid with fear, listening for any sign of movement, any whisper of sound, but only the pounding of her own heart filled the silence. The darkness pressed in on her, cold and heavy, suffocating. The smell of dust and decay, the chilling temperature, the palpable sense of dread, it all intensified the unbearable silence. Lily dared not move, afraid to break the stillness, afraid of what the silence might conceal. The silence, however, felt far more menacing than any sound, the silence of a predator stalking its prey. It was the silence of a waiting monster. And she knew, with a chilling certainty, that it was not yet over. The night was far from done. The silence, thick and suffocating, pressed down on Lily like a physical weight. It was a silence far more terrifying than the cacophony of unsettling sounds that had preceded it, a silence pregnant with anticipation, with the unspoken threat of something unseen, something lurking just beyond the periphery of her vision. She remained frozen, every muscle coiled tight, her breath shallow and ragged. The air hung heavy with the scent of dust and decay, the chill in the attic biting deep into her bones. Her flashlight lay broken on the floor, its beam extinguished, leaving her immersed in a darkness so complete it felt tangible. Slowly, hesitantly, Lily inched her hand forward, her fingers brushing against the cold, rough wood of the floorboards. The wood felt strangely damp, almost slick beneath her fingertips. She felt a prickling sensation on her skin, a crawling sensation that seemed to emanate from the darkness itself. It was as if the very air was alive, vibrating with a low hum that resonated deep within her chest. Then she heard it. A faint whisper, barely audible, yet somehow carrying a terrifying weight. It was a sibilant sound, like air hissing through a narrow crack, a sound that seemed to slither into her mind, bypassing her ears entirely. The whisper was not in any language she recognized, yet it felt intimate, personal, as if the darkness itself was speaking directly to her. She held her breath, straining to hear, to decipher the meaning of the whisper. It repeated, louder this time, the sound weaving itself into the fabric of the silence, making it even more menacing. The whisper seemed to carry a sense of malice, of intense, malevolent curiosity. It was the sound of something watching, something observing her every move, every tremor of fear. Lily's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence. She felt a desperate urge to flee, to escape the oppressive darkness of the attic, but her body refused to obey. She was paralyzed by fear, a primal terror that gripped her and held her captive. A shadow moved in the periphery of her vision, a flicker of darkness that danced just beyond the reach of her eyes. It was too swift to identify, too elusive to capture, yet its presence was undeniable. The shadow felt vast, looming, like a monstrous presence filling the attic. It seemed to stretch and contort, its edges shifting and swirling, like smoke in a windless room. The whispering intensified, becoming a chorus of unseen voices, a cacophony of sibilant sounds that echoed around her, weaving themselves into the very fabric of the silence. The sound seemed to press in on her, closing in, surrounding her, until she felt as if she were drowning in a sea of whispers. Lily's mind raced, desperately trying to make sense of what was happening, to find a rational explanation for the terror that gripped her. But there was no rational explanation. This was something beyond reason, something beyond the realm of the normal, something deeply, disturbingly supernatural. Then, from the deepest recesses of the darkness, she saw it. A figure, shrouded in shadows, took form. It was tall and gaunt, its outline blurred and indistinct, yet undeniably humanoid. The figure remained motionless, a silent sentinel in the gloom, its presence exuding an aura of chilling malevolence. Lily struggled to breathe, her lungs constricting as fear tightened its icy grip around her heart. The figure was utterly terrifying, yet something about it, its stillness, its aura of ancient power, captivated her, preventing her from looking away. Its presence felt overwhelmingly sinister, a vortex of dark energy that seemed to suck the very life out of her. The figure remained motionless, watching her, its unseen eyes boring into her very soul. Lily knew, with absolute certainty, that this was not a figment of her imagination, not a product of her fear, but a real, tangible presence. It was something ancient, something powerful, something profoundly evil. The silence stretched out, broken only by the frantic thump of Lily's heart and the ragged gasps for air escaping her lips. The figure seemed to radiate an intense cold, a glacial chill that permeated the air, penetrating her very being, stealing the warmth from her body, chilling her to the marrow of her bones. The shadowy figure did not move, but the shadows themselves did. They writhed and shifted, swirling and coalescing, morphing into grotesque shapes that seemed to reach out to her from the darkness. They were fleeting glimpses, glimpses of something monstrous, something that lurked just beyond the threshold of visibility, something that promised unimaginable horror. Lily's eyes strained to pierce the gloom, seeking some clue to the figure's identity, some detail that might explain its unnerving presence. But the darkness held tight to its secrets, revealing nothing. The figure remained a stark silhouette, a creature of pure shadow, its true form hidden from view. The whispers continued, a haunting symphony of sibilant sounds, weaving themselves into the silence. The whispers seemed to emanate from the figure itself, a chilling undercurrent to its unwavering gaze. They felt like a threat, a promise of violence, a premonition of the horror to come. Lily felt a sudden desperate surge of adrenaline, a primal instinct to survive. She knew she had to escape, that she had to get out of the attic, out of this house of secrets, before it was too late. But her body remained frozen, as if held captive by some unseen force. With a surge of willpower, bordering on desperation, Lily forced herself to move. She rolled to her side, her body scraping against the cold, hard floorboards. Her hands scrambled for purchase, her fingers finding a loose board that creaked ominously under her weight. With a grunt of effort, she pulled herself to her feet, her legs unsteady beneath her. She stumbled forward, her heart pounding like a drum, her eyes fixed on the shadowy figure. She felt its gaze upon her, piercing through the darkness, an unseen pressure pushing down on her, forcing her to move faster. Her hand groped blindly for the attic door, her fingers tracing the rough wood of the frame, her senses screaming with urgency. She felt the cold metal of the doorknob, and with a final burst of adrenaline, she grasped it and pulled. The door swung open, revealing the faint light of the hallway beyond. Lily stumbled out, her eyes blinded by the sudden transition from darkness to light, her legs carrying her forward on sheer willpower. She did not look back. She did not dare look back. She ran, the sounds of the attic fading behind her, replaced by the pounding of her own heart and the frantic rhythm of her escaping footsteps. She didn't stop running until she reached her own room, slamming the door shut and locking it. She huddled beneath the covers, heart still pounding, body trembling, mind racing with the images she'd seen in the attic's darkness. The shadow, the whispers, the cold, it all pressed down on her, suffocating her with its chilling reality. She knew she would never forget the night she confronted the shadowy figure in the attic, the night that forever changed her perception of reality. The house, she realized with a chilling certainty, held far more secrets than she had ever imagined. And some secrets, she now understood, were best left undisturbed. The night was over, but the shadow lingered, a chilling reminder of the horrors that lurked just beyond the veil of the ordinary. The attic door groaned shut behind her, the sound echoing in the sudden, blessed silence of the hallway. The transition from the oppressive darkness to the dim, familiar light of the house was almost blinding, a physical shock that sent a wave of nausea through Lily. Her legs, shaky and weak, carried her forward, propelled by a primal instinct for survival that transcended reason and fear. She didn't dare look back, didn't even slow her pace, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. Each step was a victory, a testament to her will to escape the suffocating grip of the unseen terror. The hallway stretched before her, an endless corridor leading to the sanctuary of her room, a place of refuge, of normalcy. The house, usually comforting and familiar, now felt alien, menacing. Every shadow seemed to writhe and shift, every creak of the old floorboards sounded like the approach of the shadowy figure. Her breath hitched in her throat, a ragged gasp for air that seemed to catch in the suffocating silence. The scent of dust and decay still clung to her clothes, to her skin, a physical manifestation of the horrors she had just experienced. The whispers still echoed in her ears, a haunting symphony of sibilant sounds that refused to fade. They snaked into her mind, weaving themselves into her thoughts, turning every shadow into a potential threat. It was as if the darkness of the attic had seeped into her very being, clinging to her, refusing to let go. Reaching her bedroom door, she fumbled with the knob, her fingers clumsy and stiff with adrenaline. The lock clicked shut with a satisfying finality, a barrier against the terrors lurking just beyond the threshold. She leaned against the door, her weight pressing against the cool wood, her body trembling with the residual force of her escape. The world seemed to spin, the familiar objects in her room blurring into indistinct shapes. She collapsed onto her bed, the soft mattress offering a brief respite from the relentless tension. The covers pulled around her, offering a fragile cocoon of protection. But even beneath the warmth of the blankets, the chilling cold of the attic remained, a glacial presence that seemed to penetrate her very being, stealing the warmth from her body and chilling her to the marrow of her bones. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of what she had witnessed, to find a rational explanation for the events that had unfolded. But there was no rational explanation. The shadowy figure, the whispers, the shifting shadows, it all defied logic, all pointed towards something beyond the realm of the ordinary, something deeply, disturbingly supernatural. The image of the figure remained imprinted on her mind, a terrifying silhouette against the backdrop of the attic's darkness. Tall and gaunt, its outline blurred and indistinct, yet undeniably humanoid. It exuded an aura of chilling malevolence, a palpable sense of ancient, dark power that had paralyzed her with fear. Its stillness had been more terrifying than any aggressive movement, a silent sentinel observing her every tremor, her every gasp. The unseen eyes, burning into her soul, had been the most terrifying aspect of all. She replayed the events in her mind, searching for clues, for some explanation. The broken flashlight, the slick, damp floorboards, the whispering that seemed to bypass her ears and invade her mind, all pieces of a puzzle she couldn't solve. She had felt watched, observed, as if the darkness itself had been aware of her every move. The attic, she realized, had been a vessel for something ancient and powerful, something she had unwittingly disturbed. As the adrenaline receded, leaving behind a numbing exhaustion, the chilling realization settled upon her. She had been close to death. A hair's breadth away from something unspeakable, something that had threatened to consume her. The escape had been a stroke of luck, a desperate gamble against impossible odds. Sleep offered no refuge, only a fragmented journey through the labyrinth of her fears. Nightmares, vivid and terrifying, haunted her slumber, replaying the events of the night in grotesque detail. The shadowy figure loomed over her, its unseen eyes boring into her soul. The whispers hissed in her ears, weaving themselves into her dreams, turning them into a terrifying echo of the reality she had just escaped. The following days were a blur of apprehension and unease. The house, once her sanctuary, now felt like a prison, every corner whispering secrets, every shadow harboring unseen threats. The normalcy of her life seemed to have shattered, replaced by a constant awareness of the unseen, of the darkness that lurked just beyond the veil of the ordinary. She tried to talk about her experience, to explain the terror she had endured, but the words failed her. The sheer irrationality of her story made it unbelievable, even to her. How could she possibly convince anyone of a shadowy figure, of whispers in the silence, of a chilling cold that seemed to emanate from the heart of the darkness? Her parents dismissed her account as a vivid nightmare, a product of her overactive imagination, fueled by late-night horror movies. But Lily knew, deep within her heart, that what she had experienced was real. The memories, the sensations, the lingering chill, these were tangible evidence of the night she confronted the shadowy figure in the attic, a night that irrevocably changed her perception of reality. The attic remained closed, a silent testament to the darkness it held within. Lily never dared to venture near it again, not even during the day. The house held its secrets close, and she, in turn, kept hers, understanding the profound truth that some experiences are best left undisturbed, buried in the darkness of the forgotten. The shadow in the attic may have receded, but its chilling presence lingered, a haunting reminder of the supernatural horrors that lay just beyond the realm of the ordinary, a chilling whisper in the fabric of reality. The unanswered questions remained, a constant hum of unease in the background of her existence, a constant, chilling reminder of the night she escaped from the darkness.
If you've made it this far, you've heard the whispers. The static doesn't lie. If something felt too close tonight, it probably was. Subscribe for more tales that reach through the dark. Drop a comment below. What time is it right now where you are? And who's watching with you?